the weekend again. Sit back, relax, we got the brain of band. No need to stress in the house, it's Van Bellen. The game is windsurfing, you can't yell them or tell them. We get the news, the views, the win biz. The brand's gear, just plus the world's best quiz. The Cubs, PWA. We're professionals without the pay. There's nothing in pole dancing that we won't chat. From tandem boards or a windsurfing cat. It's your one-stop shop for a laugh and listen. Tune in each week or you'll be doing the missing.
Paul. Where's the world's best quiz gone? I keep looking at that intro. It's like the world's best quiz is gone. It's gone.
We've been slack, haven't we? We need to make more questions again. But we'll get there. We'll get there. We've both been busy. How you going, Ben? How's things there?
I'm good. Although I know you've been better because I know you've just come back from sailing. And I'm scared to even ask, was it any good? Because I'm going to be jealous.
Well, it was good. It wasn't epic. It was small, but it is summer here, so it's board shorts and it's warm, and it is hard to complain. Sorry, Benny. I know it's cold.
But no, to be fair, I'm not complaining. We've got sun. We do have a little bit of wind in the next few days, so I'm kind of like excited. And I've just got a bit of new foil gear. I'm just, you know.
The last podcast with Guy, is he turning you over the line? Is he? Are we going to see you winging?
I'll be honest, it was the fins staying at the house which did it more, but still I need someone to sail with if you want to do the slalom. The winging, I'm still always going to do a bit of winging, but it's never going to be my focus. But I could see in the comments from the last podcast, there was a few people, maybe we've turned them the other way. I'm thinking, oh no.
I know. Guy did a pretty good job of selling it, didn't he?
He did.
Yeah,
so everyone who's just tuning in, obviously another week, another podcast, and we have got an interesting one this week. Now, anyone who has been around in the, I would say 80s, 90s, and even into the 2000s, this guy was definitely a prominent figure in terms of sail design. Definitely the 90s, like late 80s, 90s was his time, and then into the 2000s, which, because we'll come on to in a minute, one of my first sponsors was Arrow Sails in the UK, F2 and Arrows. And this guy, I'm pretty sure, designed those sails. And the Impact, which was the Arrows wave sail I had, I think it was the Impact. There was a few, an Aerial or something like this, but we're going to chat to him. Who have we got coming in? Because Paul obviously lives in the same country. He actually just lives down the road in terms of Aussie terms. Yeah, no,
Willem Blaauw. For any of you out there that don't know him, he's actually deserves a hell of a lot of respect because we're about to find out, but I feel like Willie was amongst probably a few other people, but one of the lead architects of creating what we now know as the modern sail, I'd imagine. I mean, everything from the camber inducer, I'm assuming loose leech, you know, I could be wrong, but I that was around the time when all that sort of development was happening.
NeilPryde Warp Speed. Anyone remember that sail? Well, we're gonna chat to Willem Blaauw. Yeah. We're gonna call him Willie. It could be Willem. It could be something else. We're gonna ask him what his name is. At the moment, he's called Willie because that's who everyone I ever spoke to always called him Willem Blaauw. I'd never heard anyone call him Willem, but in all the bits I looked at now, it's Willem. Should we bring him in and ask him what it is?
Bring him in, Benny. I'll let you bring him in. Oh, there he is.
Good evening, gents.
Good day, mate.
Hi, Willie. Thanks for joining us, mate. It's actually a real honor. And again, it's another sort of pinch me moment for myself because I've said it on this podcast a few times, but I remember opening up the magazines in the 90s and seeing images of, you know, Brindle and Dunkerbeck and whatever, and then there'll be your name that often be associated with the sail design. So thanks so much for coming on.
No problem. It's always a pleasure. It's fun looking back at the old days.
Yeah. I mean, it's actually interesting. We did a podcast with Guy Cribb last week, and I think it was after the stream. He sent me a load of his old pictures. And I tell you what, old pictures just bring back like massive memories. And I said to myself, right, the next podcast, we've got to get some pictures which just spark up these memories because some people remember everything. Me personally, I forget everything, but a picture can spark up a memory. So hopefully we're going to go through on this podcast, we're going to go through kind of your story. I think that's the best place to start, isn't it? Maybe we should get your background, because obviously you're living in Australia now. You don't sound Australian with a name like that.
No, I have a Dutch passport, and I moved here. I actually moved here, back in 1988.
Okay. Oh, so you were pretty early over there.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
where were you born, Willie?
I was born in Hong Kong. I may not look like a Chinaman, but if you cut my skin, I speak Chinese as my second language, or Cantonese as my second language. So,
but you had a Dutch. Sorry, you had a Dutch father, and was it a Scottish mother or something?
Correct. Yeah, Scottish mother.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because obviously that surname is a Dutch surname. Yeah.
100%.
Well, sounds Dutch.
Yeah, I think my grandfather was like an ambassador for the Netherlands back in sort of a different century, a different era.
Okay. And before, I asked you to send you some photos in, and I'm going to bring this photo up because this is probably pretty relevant to your early days in windsurfing here. But I'm assuming this is a picture of you learning to windsurf.
Oh, I don't think learning wasn't this. I was actually.
That looks pretty good.
Yeah. Back in '79, summer of '79, I was training for the Wing Glider World Championships in Mauritius that year. I mean, I guess everyone who works as a sailmaker, they have their blood in their heart, I suppose, in sailing of some sort. I was a sailor long before I was a windsurfer, so I was training for the Wing Glider World Championships in '79.
Wow! So '79, okay. I was 1 year old then.
Yep.
So you have been around. So give us a little bit of a rundown of your sort of journey into windsurfing. It sounds like you were into sailing before windsurfing. Give us that quick sort of rundown and places and how it kind of all happened for you.
Gosh, I was sailing before I could walk. My father had a boat launch the day I was born, so he missed my birth because he was at the boatyard. That it goes right back to those very, very early days, and subsequent to that, I've done a lot of yachting, and I've done the Sydney Hobart, I've done the Fastnet race, I've done the China Sea race. So I've done a lot of big boat racing as well. That's where I guess you started back in those days. Nowadays people come into the sport windsurfing first, and then don't even know that big boats exist. So yeah, I started my my life in my sailing career, I suppose, in big sailboats.
Okay.
And then right around that time, 77, 78, I had an opportunity to try the first windsurfers, one design and wing gliders, and I moved out of big boat sailing pretty much straight away. And I guess for a few years it was a bit of a transition, but
And which country are you in then? Whereabouts were you based?
I was based in Hong Kong. I did like a 2-year apprenticeship with Gaastra in Hong Kong in 1976 and 1977. And in that second year, I got an opportunity to go to the Gaastra sail loft in Holland and Snake, which was actually a lot of fun, a lot of interesting to do, like an apprenticeship. Again, it was big boat sales back in those days. There was no real hint of windsurfing being such a big market. And then in '78, I joined NeilPryde, because the NeilPryde factory is in Hong Kong, and I worked with NeilPryde from '78 until '91, I guess. Okay. And then I joined Gaastra in '91 and worked with them until '99, and then yep, that's in Perth. That's my little loft in Perth.
Apologies. I obviously all the photos, I don't know where they're taken, so I'm just trying to put things that are relevant to where you're at.
Vibes.
This is 1988 in Perth in my tiny little. I was actually in my garage.
Yeah, right.
See this picture for people who are listening audio only. There's got a couple of NeilPryde sails in the background, and I remember these colors because when I came into windsurfing, which was 1987, it was this kind of pink gray combo colors, which were the thing at the time. And I always remember going, oh, I know I wanted like one on, one of these sails. And it was like, I always remember the speed sails, because back then it was like, I don't know how I ended up with these speed sails, but I always ended up with these massive, like low cut speed sails, because wave sailing just wasn't on my radar. So like these sails is quite interesting.
I guess I was more actively involved in at that time at NeilPryde in the racing sails, because that was my interest. But you have to remember that there was a time going back a long way where I have pictures in my shed of some of the very first wave sails that didn't have battens, just a straight leech or a hollow cut leech. I guess probably around I'd say probably the late 70s, battens got introduced, like short battens got introduced into the sails. And then eventually back in sort of about 83, we put one full length batten in the top of the sail. So, that was an introduction to a fully battened sail, if you like.
Mad, isn't it? Yeah. It's mad where it all comes from. Just give us we'll have a quick run through of wave, and then we'll come back and go into a bit more detail. So NeilPryde until early 90s, and then you joined Gaastra.
Yeah, Gaastra. I worked with Gaastra from early 91 or mid 91 until about 99. And then I joined Arrows, F2 Arrows in 99, and did a lot of their, the Impact and a lot of their race sails. I guess I did all the sails at that point.
The Tomahawk.
Tomahawk, that was one of the first ones that I sort of made a modification. Excuse me, I didn't design it from scratch. It was an original name that they had, but when they reintroduced it in sort of 99, 2000, I was involved in that process.
Yeah, see, that's interesting for me anyway. Like I was doing like Olympic sailing from, sort of junior sailing early 90s, and then Olympic sailing, then didn't make Sydney, and then but that later 90s, 2000, I got sponsored by Whiteboarders in the UK, Dave White. And obviously F2 Arrows, he was everywhere and doing everything. I mean, I'm sure we got some stories from Dave White. And I had that Tomahawk racing sail and the F2 Sputnik 265 or something. And that's like my early memory of just going so fast. I should have brought up those pictures, actually. I don't know how the hell I'd find them, but that was like epic kit. And as I was saying earlier, the wave sails as well, the Impact. Francisco Goya won his first world title, I think, on that.
Absolutely did. He certainly did. I think that would have been 2003, maybe 2001.
Yeah. I think 2000. I think Goya got his world title in
2000, wasn't it?
Yeah, 2000. Yeah. I think.
I don't think so. I don't think he was on the team in 2000. Frankly. Okay. I mean, I've got a 2000 catalog here. I've got the Arrows 2000 catalog right here.
Okay.
And, the names on the catalog were guys like Karen Yagi, Brian Talmer, Peter Volwater, Ant Baker.
Yeah, Peter Volwater.
The primary guys, and then there was a lot of guys around the side. But I don't think Francisco didn't join until a year later.
Okay. This photo that's up on the screen at the moment, who's that?
That's Axel Ohm, a German guy. I think his sail number was G35 or something.
Yeah.
He's based up in Hamburg and Cape Town.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say that there's so much. I sort of feel like there's so much to go through because you've been involved in different sail brands over a long period of time. So I'm sort of feeling like to just go back to the start. You said you sort of started off like in the 70s and the early 80s. What brand were you with again then?
At 76, I got involved in sail making, and it started out with Gaastra. So I guess where it's confusing is that was not windsurfing related. It was big boat related stuff. It was yacht sails. It was I guess in those days I saw the first Windsurfer 1 designs back in 75, 76 in Hong Kong. Okay. And it wasn't on my radar as something to do. It looked more like a toy or a casual sport rather than a serious sport back in those days. It wasn't until I joined NeilPryde in 78
Okay. But so you, and yeah, sorry.
But
Yeah,
you do windsurf.
I do. I was Hong Kong windsurfing champion.
That's what I mean. So it's so funny because I was just like, I'm just wanting to clear it up because it sounds like, so you got into sail design. That was your thing. You wanted to do sail design anyway.
Absolutely.
And then you're doing big boat racing. Windsurfing comes onto the scene. You go, okay, not really into it yet. Then you sort of get into it. And then that obviously changes more into you designing your own sails, or you're doing it for NeilPryde, or did it start?
I was doing it for NeilPryde 100%. I was working for NeilPryde. I mean, I guess in '78 I joined NeilPryde in the big boat division and was doing sales. And then, there was quite a few of us working in sail design, and I sort of got moved into windsurfing sales. It was sort of an interest of mine, I suppose. Windsurfing became an interest of mine.
Yeah.
I mean, NeilPryde was back in those days. NeilPryde was producing, a large number of sails for pretty much every board manufacturer in the industry. I mean, obviously you can take Windsurfer One designs and wing gliders and Mistral. They weren't doing Mistral. It's probably about the only brand they didn't produce. He didn't produce, but he produced. If you can think of a small board brand, Neil produced the sails.
So how many sails we talking? Do you know? Rough. I mean,
I can tell you there was a point in in '81 where we probably produced as many as 1,600 sails a day. But these are sails that were going on to standard sails, either no batten sails or
a day.
A day. We were producing. We're talking about the peak of windsurfing in the early '80s. It was crazy days. It was crazy days.
Wow.
So what I missed it. What years was this?
81. We produced.
Yeah.
There was I think the peak, it topped out at something like 1,648 sails in one day.
And that's just one brand, right? So
yeah.
How many brands do you think were doing similar numbers?
Oh no, there's no way that there was a lot of big brands. I mean, the big ones for NeilPryde would have been, Wing Glider and Windsurfer.
Yeah. Okay.
Big was before Tiga came along. There were big boards.
Yeah.
And they were producing for Big. They were producing for Tiga. They produced. Think of a name. The Whaler.
Whaler. I was going to say
the 10 Carter boards. I'm trying to think of some of the names. There was a Swedish brand called
Winter.
Yeah. You just pick a name, and about the only one that Neil didn't produce sales for was the Mistral boards.
Wow. That's insane numbers. I love to hear numbers because, you have rough ideas of what people are doing now, but the numbers back then are just insane. Like there'll be some brands that, wow, that's a lot. That's a lot.
I think back in those early, like in the 80s, early 80s, we're talking about like 80, 81, there were companies that had the capacity, the capability of manufacturing products, but they weren't involved in the sport of sailing. You've probably heard of Browning Guns. Yeah. They actually produced a board at one stage, and so they had sales made by NeilPryde. And there was a company called Connolly Water Skis up in Seattle. They decided to make windsurfing boards and get sales from NeilPryde. The list of companies, Neil probably doesn't even remember half the company. Well, he probably does because he dealt with them. But
yeah, wow.
Yeah,
the list is endless.
Yeah. So your time at NeilPryde, early 80s, what was like the biggest breakthrough? Do you remember? Like, what's some of the biggest breakthroughs you remember? Like someone, I'm guessing.
Where do you start? I mean,
so many, isn't there? It must have been happening.
There are. I mean, I can probably retrace the beginnings of where we did. First up was obviously all those hollow leach, straight leach wave sails, but then it changed into the fathead sails that the guys at Maui sails, Barry Spanier and Jeff Bourne made at Maui sails.
Yeah.
They did them for High Fly. There's another huge name that was producing, tens of thousands of boards and having sails made at NeilPryde. And they came up with the fathead design with the V batten in the top at the head of the sail.
Willie, when you talk about all these innovations, do you mind just putting what year it was roughly to? Because that's the part that I'm also interested in, just to get that timeline. of
So
development.
I don't know if either of you two youngsters have ever heard of a fathead sail.
I
I've heard of it.
with the fat head. My dad had one.
That was designed by Barry Spanier and Jeff Bourne at Maui Sails, and we produced them at the NeilPryde factory in Hong Kong. And that would have been, I'm guessing, around 81, 82, the very early versions of that.
Yeah, okay. Because so basically, sorry for my ignorance on this, Willie, because obviously I was 4 years old in 81, but essentially a windsurfer was a triangle sail, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden there was no battens, and then battens start going in, or at least half battens or something.
Yeah, about 83 we started putting battens. Like those ones went into the top of those wave sails, I suppose it was at that time. And then in about 82, 83, we Monty Spindler was working with NeilPryde, and together we had some involvement in changing, the original Windsurfer One design from 3 short leech battens to 2 short leech battens and a full length batten in the head of the sail.
Yeah, I've seen it. And then from there you went to the fathead. Well, the fathead came about because the batten and everything. Yeah, okay, yeah. And then obviously after that, then you started putting more battens in sails. That was kind of the general.
I'm guessing the full length battens made it in probably would have been about 83 that we went to full length battens and then to camera induced sails. That was happening all around that sort of time. In 83, I moved to Ireland in 83. NeilPryde opened up a factory in Cork.
Okay.
In 1980, I think it might have been about 81 or 82. And in 83, I went over there I spent 2 years at the NeilPryde factory in Cork, helping them, I guess, spending time with the Irish and teaching them how important millimeters meant in a sail design, in a product. I think it was too easy to take shortcuts, and so I spent 2 years. And in those days, it was full length battens. In 83, we were doing. I guess one of the huge things at that time was the very first wing mast that Barry did with Fred Hayward. They were doing that in Maui, and I had one sent to me in Ireland. Unfortunately, it got damaged in transit, so we never got a chance to finish that off. But it was all happening in the early 80s.
So a wing mast, is it like a teardrop shaped mast or something, or what?
It was a mast that was probably about a foot wide at the widest point, and then it sort of tapered, maybe half that at the bottom to a fine tip at the top. It was, it was a predecessor to a camber-induced sail.
Yeah, sure, okay. And so when that was produced, so I'm just fascinated because this is it's before Ben's and I's time really, but when that wing mast came out, was that a product that was actively promoted to the general public, or was that I see. That was just purely a specialist thing that a pro would use in a speed event or something.
Yeah, it was being done in conjunction with Barry Spanier was doing it in conjunction with Fred Hayward. I think in your intro that you did at the very beginning, there's a picture of me on the right-hand side and a picture of someone on the left-hand side. I think that's a picture of Fred Hayward. With a wing mast.
Okay.
He started out his speed sailing career with his very first serious record was basically something like a helicopter wing, a helicopter rotor. Essentially, I think it might have been made by a helicopter engineer rather than a mast manufacturer.
Right. Okay. So the fascinating thing is you basically have lived through. You got to see the whole development of windsurfing from the early to the sort of golden age. So maybe give us a sense of what it was like being in the windsurf industry at that time, because I imagine the industry's booming, probably a lot of pressure on you to develop product, and you're probably super busy developing product. I mean, what was life for you like during that time?
We didn't have any regulations on 40 hours a week or even 38 hours a week back in those days. I would just work as long as it took to get the job done. We did 6 days a week and 7 if we had to. The factories were open. There's no unions or regulations in Hong Kong. We were just working 7, at least 6 days a week, sometimes 7. The factory was running 7 days a week. yeah, we were just cranking sales out for different manufacturers as quick as we could get the material and get the product produced. It was all full on.
Yeah, because the other thing too is, these days, the development is quite refined. So you have little changes here and there. But back in those days, every year, big steps.
Big steps.
Huge steps. So that would have been super exciting. Like when people, like, when the New Year's product comes out, people are like, oh wow, now the sail's got buttons in it or something, or camber inducers. I mean, that would have created a bit of hype, I imagine, with people.
I think it did. Yeah. I mean, if I look back at the catalogs, I mean, I think I sent you some pictures of snaps of a NeilPryde catalog from about 86, 87, and by 86, everything was fully battened. Even 85 was fully battened sails, full length battens, and we were trying to get this aerodynamic shape out of the mast, and that was caused first of all with the cams, and then secondly it was with the RAF, the RAF sails. Barry Spanier was the first one to create the RAF sails, and from there it evolved into that's the very first version. That warp speed was the very first version of a camber-induced sails that we produced. I think that's Fred Hayward sitting on that sail.
Yeah, looks like it.
So is it true the camber-induced, do they come from hang gliders? Is that?
I believe that the two guys, there was a guy that we had a license with, or NeilPryde had a license with, I should say, and there was a guy that Gaastra had a license with. I think both of those guys had backgrounds in hang gliders. Yeah.
Okay.
The very first versions were just we were making the NeilPryde. We were just making them out of a piece of Lexan, and heat molded them to shape for the very first versions, and then eventually we sort of did it in a molded, in a proper mold.
Yeah, and throughout the.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, you go.
I was going to say they're very, very. I remember going to Japan in 1985 for the Sometime World Cup with the first versions of those warp speed sails, and the guys from North Sails and the guys from Gaastra Sails, you saying to me, "You won't have to worry about taking those sails back home with you. You can throw them all in the bin afterwards." That was before the race started, when we were struggling to get them to work properly.
All right.
And by the end of the regatta, I think we had something like 7 out of the top 10, including the top 3, were using that sail.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That must have been so cool to be involved in that type of innovation, because you see it in a lot of sports when they're new. They just, like foiling has been like that. Someone comes up with a new thing, but I think it was even more apparent back in the early windsurfing days. There were such big steps, like. I can't remember who we had on the podcast was kind of going through, and then this board did this, and this fin did this, and then we did this, and then you'd turn up and you just kill everybody.
That would be someone like Peter Tommen, sounds like, because Peter was one of those guys at the leading edge, or Hugues de Turckheim, Those were the guys at the leading edge of a lot of that development.
Yes, I mean, it would have been so good. Like, I was around, but not around in the scene at the time. You look at from the outside, but you don't get that same sense as the guys in the industry, And I could imagine you turning up and someone going, "Look at this! Look at this!"
You're not seriously going to try to race with that thing.
That's so good. That's so good.
And then I think the guys that won the regatta were guys like. We're talking about a time, and I know you guys might find this hard to believe, but we're talking about a time that before Anders Bringdahl and Bjorn Dunkerbeck, even those guys were too young back in those days. Robbie was racing, but the guys that were winning races back in those days were guys like Tom Ledecky, Tim Argesen from Denmark, Bjorn Schrader from Germany. So yeah, it was.
Who is Thomas Pearson? Obviously the Simmer designer now. I'm sponsored by Simmer, and he's told us a few tales from back then, because I guess that's his era. That sort of down that time with Tim as well. Yeah.
Do you find, because when we reminisce about these times, it almost seems like it didn't happen in the sense of Yeah, you look at windsurfing now, where obviously it's a much smaller sport than it was when it was completely booming. So to talk about all these sort of stories, is it almost weird for you to see the trajectory of how windsurfing has gone from then to now? I mean, do you get very sentimental about it, or is it?
No, not at all. I guess
Okay.
I mean, it's sad to see it go, but I guess it's like everything, and it doesn't matter. You posted a picture about the Gaastra logo that was once upon a time a feature on all the Gaastra sails. Well, guess what? If you get sentimental about that sort of stuff, then you might as well not bury your head in the sand, but go find something else to do, because commercial realities, the Gaastra logos, people. It's bizarre, you've got one person that owns the logo and a different person that's making the sales, and they don't have rights. That's why they changed the logo and the name.
I was about to say, just while you're here, let me know what is this? Do you know the official story behind it? Because Gastra's still going, isn't it, with that logo?
No, I think they're using it. I think the people that own the license for that logo
is the clothing.
Is the different people that own the license for Gaastra windsurfing sales. How about that for a simple version? And they kind of agree on terms. And I guess they do a lot of clothing and other products that use that logo. And it's like anything these days. If you want to use a brand logo, you've got to pay for it.
Yeah.
And to get around it, they don't even they've actually called it GA sales instead of that thing. I was at the Loft and Snake in 1977, and it's steeped in history. I mean, I'm sure both you guys have watched the movie called Pretty Woman, and a lot of that story is about the end story is about this guy who takes private companies. Buys private companies, breaks them up into lots of little parts and sells them for a lot more money. And that's exactly what's happening with a company like Gaastra, and it's happening with North Sails as well. Yeah. And it's actually happening to NeilPryde at the moment as well. It's happened to NeilPryde as well. The German distributor for NeilPryde bought the brand, and someone else has got the rights to manufacturing. And so he just, it's all, and someone else is doing the clothing, and the guy in Germany just does the one guy, and Knut Buddig, who has the rights to the Gaastra windsurfing, and I think he has Gaastra kikes as well, but he doesn't have access to all the other parts of Gaastra.
I thought I'd explain this too for anyone here who doesn't know, but the Gaastra logo, the famous sort of image castle there is in a castle thing is in a town called Snake in the Netherlands, in the sort of northern part. It's actually spelled SNEEK. I because I obviously love windsurfing, I did a bit of a pilgrimage, if you like. I was in that area of Holland visiting family. They were in the south, and I thought I want to go up to Snake and check this thing out. And I walked across that thing, and it was super cool. It's a beautiful structure. Like the actual town of Snake is super. It's like going back in time, isn't it? It's beautiful structures like that everywhere. But I do want to say something about this sort of thing. And I know that, there's commercial realities, and people, they often think about money rather, over other things. But I do think it's a shame that they weren't able to come to some agreement where the brand holder or the copyright holder could say, well, we'll let the windsurfing brand continue, but you're not allowed to, make any clothes or any other paraphernalia around it, but you can still use the brand on your sails. Because I would have thought from a branding point of view, the clothing brand could leverage off the windsurfing side and go, that's like the image, you know what I mean? Like that's the image of the brand, but we're the ones that sell the clothes. That's just me. Obviously not everyone operates like that, but I do see it as a bit of a shame because it's such an iconic brand, and anyway, that's just my two thoughts on it.
I think, again, I'm not speaking from any knowledge here, just a little bit of a guess, to be honest. But obviously the guys who owned that logo wanted money, and I think they probably thought that Gaastra couldn't just do it without it, But to be fair to Gaastra, they've kind of transitioned into this GA without people calling them GA. In my head, people still call them Gaastra or know them as Gaastra.
Yeah.
So they've kind of slipped out of probably paying quite a lot of money for that logo, you know, and maybe now that the other company, again, I'm just speaking from nothing, no knowledge at all, that maybe they go, you know what, we maybe come back with a lower offer, because maybe I'm guessing they didn't take it because it was a higher offer. Can someone, my question is, can someone take that Gaastra logo now and start a sail brand?
No, there's not. No, I think
no. If they pay the licensing,
no.
Okay.
No.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh well, it is
messy. It's you know what? There's a lot of there's the cost of doing it. It would be very messy. The whole situation with the different people owning different bits and pieces. It's too messy. But you know what? Yeah, it is a shame. You know,
I'm just a sentimental softie, Willie.
I think someone will have to pay a lot of money to make it happen, and that's people are always looking for ways to you know, you've got one guy that owns the rights to Gaastra windsurfing, but he doesn't have the rights to the logo. It's that simple, and you know, there's somehow, I guess what happens in commercial realities is that you know, if one person is paying millions of dollars to use that logo for clothing and for other products, you'd expect the windsurfing brand to pay.
Sorry, I'm still not sure about that.
I think you would know. You still expect, you know, them to pay an equal amount. It wouldn't be reasonable for one company to pay shitloads of money, another one to pay a lot less money. And that's commercial realities. It's not going to change.
It's a shame, definitely a shame, because that is an iconic logo. Like, I grew up, you know, as the two big heavy hitters when I was growing up was obviously NeilPryde and Gaastra. They were.
Well, I think what you have to understand is that logo was established about the time that, you know, 100 years ago. More than it was actually created. Gaastra's been around since the 1890s.
Oh, really?
And so it's one of the oldest sail companies in the entire world, and it's a huge shame. I think it's a shame. When I first heard about it, I couldn't believe that the guys in Germany who own the brand, the
Germans.
The Germans.
The Germans. Is the Germans listening? No, they can put pressure on them.
Yeah, and look, they own the rights to the Gaastra.com website, but everything's branded GA. I guess it is weird, but anyway.
Yeah, no, it is.
The same's happening. It's obviously happening with North when they had to transition out of away from North Sails and into the Duo.
Boards and more. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they get that as well, and
look, things change.
But it's interesting with the North Sails and the Fanatic. You know, you think in a number of years, North Sails hasn't gone anywhere because Boards and More, for people who don't know, are licensing the North Sails brand, you know, to put on their gear. So when it turned to duotone, they just did, as far as I know, they didn't want to pay the license fee anymore, or they couldn't negotiate.
Yeah.
And they just went, well, we don't need it. And North Sails probably thought, well, you definitely need it. And they were like, well, no, we don't. And it was interesting because I heard Boards and More owns the brand Arrows, you know, the logo. And there was talk of that coming up. And why didn't they use Arrows? Because they had Fanatic. And then obviously it was duotone. And there was a big backlash at the time. I remember everyone going, what the hell? This is no way this is going to work. And now they've got rid of Fanatic. And actually it is just duotone. And they're covering literally every sport. And when you look at it financially, from a point of view finance, it actually makes a lot of sense now that they've managed to keep their brand, you know, at that high end, and still they're only got one brand to cover, because before they had all these different logos, they had all the different merchandise that they had to do for each individual one. So financially, I can see how it makes sense. But when you've grown up with this brand names and they've got history. It feels sad. It just feels sad. It's like the Gaastra logo.
Yeah, look, I don't know what else to tell you. I probably know more about it, and probably shouldn't talk too much about it because I think somebody's writing there that opening up a can of worms, Paul. But it really is a can of worms, and whatever actually happened is going to, the people who I probably know more than I'm going to talk about because everyone, there's probably all kinds of legal action going on about all that sort of stuff. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, I've got a question here from Vintage Fun Cup Tour. I thought it was a license for Gaastra clothes.
Yeah, that's pretty much. They have
it's a very high-end brand, isn't it?
Oh,
the clothing.
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
Is.
Yeah. I mean, you guys probably remember Windsurfing.TV as a clothing brand.
Yeah.
And I think there was a Jet Set clothing brand at one stage, and they were selling T-shirts for hundreds of dollars.
Yeah. Jet Set, they sponsored Josh Stone, did they? Jet Set, because I always remember thinking, what the hell's that on his cell? Jet Set, and it was only recently, like just about 2 seconds ago, when I just know now it's a clothing brand.
Yeah, and Gaastra's gone down that same track. I mean, they're paying a lot of money for a license, and you can't be giving that license fee to some organization or company to pay a fraction of that, whatever they're being paying for. I see Gaastra clothing here in Australia.
Really?
Yeah.
Is it sold here? Is it?
Yeah, I think I've seen it in shops. Yeah, I mean, not that I go to shops too often. But,
I saw it in Silt, like on the other side of the island where the ferry was. There was a super expensive shop, and I still remember it because I was like, oh, Gaastra clothing. I didn't know they did clothing. And then I looked at the price of the jacket, and I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, I know. It's expensive, isn't it? Yeah,
absolutely. Look, and there's license fees involved in a lot of that sort of stuff. So.
Yeah. No, I had the same experience when I visited the Town Snake. I was just walking around or whatever, and walked into a sailing shop that was actually near that structure. They call that the water port. That's what they actually call that sort of entry to the harbor. But I walked into a sailing shop, and they had, it was full of sailing clothes, like brands like Musto and Hallie Hansen or whatever it was. But they had a whole section of Gaastra clothing, and they were. They were sort of €400 jackets, and it was all like pretty high end stuff. It was interesting. It was quite interesting.
I've just realised, Paul, like Gaastra and GA don't support the channel, so we need to get rid of that picture.
Well, maybe they will support now.
Maybe we stop talking about it at least.
It's all about money now, isn't it? Windsurfing.
Well, it is.
Money.
It's a sad fact of life, and it's actually creeps into every part of our worlds. And we should, I guess, talk about the value of the product rather than the cost of the product. It doesn't matter if it's if you're talking about the price of beer or the price of clothing.
Yeah. No, that's right. No, it's obviously all evolved. There's an interesting point here from Darren. What about the original Windsurfer, now Windsurfer LT? Obviously, the brand Windsurfer that expired, didn't it, or something? Is that?
Oh, I think what expired was probably their patent over the patent over. Oh gosh, going back a long time. Windsurfer Hoyle Schweitzer and his wife, they set up patents. For windsurfing, not just windsurfer, but windsurfing, and that was in some countries, like they put one in Australia. I think there was one in Germany. One in Holland, one in UK, one in Germany, one in Japan. They didn't do every single country. They just picked the ones that they thought had big potential, and so.
But what is the story with the brand? Well, I mean, I don't know of any brand, windsurfer brand.
As far as I know, sorry, my brain has gone from Cobra.
I think the LT part, it's just for me, it's just a lighter version of what the original one was. So it's not. I don't think it's still.
No, but I just mean the word windsurfer. Like, if you want to start a windsurf brand and call it Windsurfer, like is that taken, or what's the story? Or
I'll talk to people I know and let you know.
Yeah, no, but I'm pretty sure. Who's the guy that runs Cobra? We had him on the podcast. My brain's
You're
going.
thinking of Bruce Wiley?
Yeah, Bruce Riley, exactly. I'm pretty sure they brought it back from those guys. It was like they wanted to bring it back,
When
and
you
I
say
just
brought it, you mean bought it back from?
Well, I don't know if again, I don't know in terms of money. I just know he wanted to bring it back, and I think that I guess whoever had it before, which was the Schweitzers, I'm pretty sure they were all on board to bring it back. And I mean, topically, the World Championships, as far as I know, is happening in Perth right now for the
in 2 weeks' time. Yeah, on the 29th.
Okay, because I saw that video the other day we got sent, Paul, of the boards being unloaded. So it really felt like the old days when I used to turn up to like a Tiga or Lower Junior event, and there was this massive Tiga truck, and it was just full of boards, and you'd come and they would just go, right, there's your board, there's your sail, there's your board. Is that what happens in the LT?
Well, I think it's all more about being a one design configuration where everyone has to use the exact same equipment. So the Windsurfer and the Windsurfer LT was much the same.
But is the Windsurfer LT now? Are they renting these out, or is it part of the entry?
Well, it's not. I guess it's never that simple.
Okay.
I think they do rent them out if you want to participate and use a board. But it's an Australian company is importing them into Australia, and I haven't actually. I'll find out. I'll get some answers to questions tomorrow.
Yeah, no, because it would definitely be interesting. I mean, I always thought actually it would be interesting to go to one of these LT events because, again, obviously it's not the cutting edge equipment, but I think it would still have the social side, and
it is the social thing,
and you would still have that community, which is what it's about. And then it's more goes back to yacht racing, sailboat racing, where you're using a bit of tactics. There's a bit of banter. And I could see the appeal of this. I really can. Mm-hmm. You don't have to carry a boat around on a trailer. You still can put it on your car.
It doesn't become an arms race. It becomes, you've got to use your own skill to win races, and it sorts out the men from the boys.
Yeah. I thought the video of them unloading the boards in Perth was interesting. It only goes for about 30 seconds. I might just play it for everybody here because, as a fan of windsurfing, I was actually quite encouraged to see how many boards were being unloaded, and it gives you a sense of. Well, windsurfing's certainly not dead. I mean, it's still big numbers in these.
I believe in this I was talking to somebody on Monday that I think there might be. They've got something like 300 entrants for that World Championship.
It's amazing. It's so cool, isn't it? It's super cool. Super cool. Yeah. Sorry, mate. Let you finish.
I'll plan to go down and watch it. I think it'll be interesting to.
Who's your money on? Any old boys? Because I heard McKircher's entering.
Yes, Scotty McKircher. I saw him a few months ago getting in some training, and who's the money on? Yeah, I'll wait and see the final entry list. There's some good guys coming. Apparently, there's some good internationals coming in as well. So you'll be surprised. A lot of people. I guess the good thing with this is that people can fly in from the US or from Europe or wherever in the world. They can come in here. They don't have to worry about bringing any equipment. You don't have to travel with 700 kilos of excess baggage. You can just rock up with your
super cool
stuff there at the beach, ready to go.
I like it. I can see myself doing it at some point.
Benny,
I love board racing.
Mate, I would like to go in it just to beat you, Benny. I reckon.
Fight and talk.
I doubt I will, but I'll still talk it up. I'll play the video before I forget. Let's see.
Yes, last one.
I'm guessing this is
here. Our happy band of helpers. Shelley, Laurie, morning. And here we have a great mountain of brand new Windsurfer LTs. How fantastic.
I mean, for anyone who's listening only, there is how many boards there?
So that's the first part of the job.
A couple of hundred,
I've heard 300, but I'm not 100% sure.
300
colour paths.
Wow.
All in boxes.
There we go.
It's a big old box as well, isn't it? 300.
So that's it. So next job is to unwrap them all. And then
where is it?
Cardboard back
Netherlands.
This is actually at South Perth Yacht Club.
Putting in the fins.
South Perth. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So put them on the racks, and then on the appropriate racks, that is. So
I
getting
said
closer.
South Purpose if I
by
know. Where's
the
that?
day. Catch you later.
Yeah, no, it's the beauty is you
Here
can
we
come
go.
in.
First one out of the pack is the grey Worlds board, looking pretty good. Looking pretty good.
Looking very Australian.
Looking pretty nice, eh?
Got a bit of graphics on them.
Logo. Oh, how good do they look?
Couple of
Fantastic.
kangaroos.
Beautiful.
I think they're all designed by the graphics on those are designed by Mark Paul, who was the original designer of the
Bombora.
Bombora boards. Yeah.
Wow. That's so cool. I love that. See, that's what I love. I like that they keep the connection to the past. That's why I was bringing up this, this Gaastra thing. It's a shame. Okay, I can't do much about it, but I do like the sense of history. I like a sense of history. It gives you something, I don't know, it builds up a culture.
Yeah.
And I think, and windsurfing, I mean, there are a lot of things from the past, but it's a shame when you see things fall by the wayside. So no, yeah, that's actually that was one of the names, Tim Gourlay. He's one of the the red hot guys in that Windsurfer LT class. Because the thing with that Windsurfer LT class, it's not you have the PWA, the slalom, and the wave sailors and all this, but there's a whole different crew that dominate those Windsurf LT things, isn't it? It's a whole other range of people.
I'm interested, definitely to see who turns up, because I guess my age group would be the younger side of who could turn up. And obviously I was into longboard racing back in the 90s, so it'd be interesting to see from my Olympic, because I still see like Joao Rodriguez and these guys turning up to the raceboard worlds. And even like these will be the young crew, and then you've got the Scott McKercher kind of. Who's the other guy? Scotty
O'Connor,
is it?
Yeah, Scott O'Connor. Yeah, he'll be over here. Yeah.
So like it'd be. I'm genuinely interested to see who's going to be around. Again, I guess for the new guys into windsurfing, they probably couldn't give a shit. But I think for anyone who was in it in that 90s, 80s, 90s period, it will be really interesting just to see who turns up. And who's still got it, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. And this windsurf.
There's an important part about this event that a lot of people aren't aware of, that some of the older guys would be, but they actually had a windsurfer class world championships in Perth in 1983. So this is like a 50-year anniversary of that event. Yeah, they had it 40 years back in 83.
Yeah. That's no, I think it's awesome for the sport. It's going back to the roots. It's going back to what made windsurfing popular in the start. I think it'd be silly
it's what made windsurfing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No, that's right. Yeah, it's funny because you might not have listened to a previous podcast, Willie, but the topic comes up often about what can we do to help windsurfing. But I sometimes think that Windsurf LT class is one of the obvious answers. Because it worked in the past, so why wouldn't it work again? Okay, maybe it won't go to quite the same level as it did because we've got kite surfing and winging and all these new sports, but still, it's a great way to get people in. And sailing clubs, it's a sort of board that they would take on board as part of their fleet. They're not going to take short boards and wave boards and slalom boards. It's all a bit too techy. It's the LT. It's a one design. It's relatively affordable. I'm excited by it. The other thing, sorry to ramble on here, but the other thing that was interesting I thought about too, Ben, was last week, Willie, we had a discussion with Guy Gribb, who's a famous windsurfer.
I know.
And all right, cool. And he's really enthusiastic about winging at the moment. And one of the advantages of winging is you don't need as much wind, 15 knots, and you can sort of get around. But the other day I was standing at the beach here in front of Geraldton, and the wind was 5 to 10 knots. It was like 5 knots, 6 knots. Beautiful day, calm water, just a nice light breeze blowing. Everyone on the beach, because when it's 30 knots, no one's on the beach. When it's 5 knots, everyone's out. And I was thinking, this is perfect windsurf LT weather. And you can't wing in this weather, and you can't kite in this weather, basically. So I was thinking. I think that's again just that craft it's perfect for light winds, as well as stronger winds. But anyway, I can see myself getting one of those boards. I want to be able to sail. I just want to sail around. I can sail from my place around the marina up into town, do the shopping and sail back. I want to get one. Anyway,
What's interesting, and I know because this happened to me this year, and it was almost like a revelation. I was like I had like a moment. We did like the simmer shoot here in Cyprus, and there was no wind, and we were shooting like the beginner gear, which is like big board, dagger board, and some light wind sail. And me and Alessio, who are both obviously wave sailors, I've got a racing background, but we just went out and had a play around the island. And I still can remember we were going out. There's no wind at all. And I remember thinking, this obviously is not what people are aiming for these days. They're all aiming for high performance, playing in as fast as you can. But there was something very, very, and I'm talking very enjoyable about, I called it sailing. It is windsurfing, but it felt like we were just sailing and we didn't need speed. It was more, there was a couple of us, we were having a laugh, we were exploring, and we could kind of go where we wanted. And I have to say, I kind of went, this is what we've lost, I think, in windsurfing. And this is what made it big. And again, I know times change and everyone go, oh, shut up, Ben, you're living in the past. But there is definitely an element of windsurfing which should be more towards that sailing. And it doesn't need to be so high performance, so, cutting edge. It can be about a good community of people going sailing and cruising around and just enjoying literally the quietness and just, I don't know how to explain it.
Mate, 100%, mate. Because the thing is, again, it's those conditions, 5 knots, 6, 7 knots. It's calm. You don't have to worry about huge chop. And people on the beach can actually then look at windsurfing and see it. Whereas when I go down to Corals and 30 knots, I mean, the only people that are there are keen windsurfers. It's visually like that.
Blasted down there when it's like that.
Yeah, exactly. Like this event in Perth is going to be, I mean, I could be wrong, but I see it as a hugely positive event for windsurfing in general. On the river there, they'll have 300 sails and the nice colorful ones, the triangle ones are all super colorful. It's like retro. Yeah. And it's just going to look spectacular. Like all of a sudden people are going to be like, oh, windsurfing, people windsurf. And it's going to, I don't know. I've got a feeling it's going to really, kick off a few people's interest in it again. But yeah, I think it's super positive. And the other thing is, as you can see, I'm sort of talking a bit much about this subject now because I'm all enthusiastic. But Jim here brings a very good point. I was down the beach the other day, as I mentioned, with a friend who doesn't windsurf. And I'm sitting there looking at this beautiful, day. And this girl, she was sort of interested in maybe wanting to learn, or, we were talking about windsurfing. And I thought, I'm sure everyone here is listening has maybe had this experience, or, you can imagine this experience. You have someone who wants to learn and they say, oh, Paul, teach me on your gear or give us a go of your gear. I'm like, you can't use my gear. You just sink on it. You can't, I actually don't have any beginner gear or anything to teach anyone on. Whereas if I had it like a Windsurfer LT, you can easily teach someone on that, and plus you can then use it yourself to race your mates on or have some fun. So I think, we talk about getting more people into windsurfing, but if you can't even teach, if you don't even have gear to teach your friend, what hope is there? Yeah. Who else is going to teach them? There's no schools around. Like we're the ones that are going to have to teach people. Well, you know what I mean? If you can. So anyway.
Yep.
Enough about that. This is Willie's podcast, not
It's an interesting point. It's definitely related to your, early days coming up. I mean, obviously you saw the changes. Obviously, I mean, it's interesting because as the kit got better in terms of performance, the numbers got less. You would have seen it weirdly, because like you say, 80s was rammed, wasn't it?
Well, when we were producing 1,600 sails a day, it wasn't fully battened. It wasn't those type of sails. It was the one design type of sail. Those sails that people used for everyday use. I was Hong Kong champion 4 years in a row, and it was on a wing glider board that had a standard sail that had a positive flotation, and you could sail it whether it was you know, a couple of knots or whether it was blowing 30 knots. You know, it wasn't necessarily that much fun in 30 knots, but it was still fun to survive a race, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's super interesting.
Yeah.
So in your history, obviously we got to the Gaastra stage of that. Big moments in Gaastra. Were you part of the flexi tip thing?
I was a big part of that. Yeah, that flexi tip. I was actively involved.
What's it called? Float tip. Float.
Flexi tip, I think is what it was. I'm not sure if we called it flexi tip or something else. I can't remember the name that we gave it. That it was given. But I did. It was developed by Pat Goodman. I don't know if you ever heard of a guy from Hawaii. His sail brand was Good Sails. He welded up this metal contraption which we stuck in the top of the mast, and then put a fishing rod. Essentially, the very first versions were a fishing rod in the top of the sail, and we zipped it up closed. But it goes back to probably mid-90s, I suppose, 97. I'm sort of the 96, 95. We made the first ones. I can't remember the age. I sort of have to think back to where we were and what we were doing to try to work out what year things were happening. Yeah, that was not 90s. That was 80s, boy. That was late 80s, early 90s at the Maui Sales Loft in Maui.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was making some modifications to a sail for one of our team guys. I can't see a sail number on there, but I do recognize the place.
So in you went from Gaastra, and then we went to Arrows. What's your sort of memories of? Do you have much interaction with the team riders? Like, I want to know, like, who was the worst team riders, who was the best, who was the like. I love to hear those stories, because sometimes from the outside looking in, you can't always tell. I know that for a fact. Have you got any good insight into team riders, or who was the legends, who was the easiest going ones? You don't have to dish too much dirt, but just...
No, I mean they were yeah. Geez, it's hard to find hard. I guess we worked with guys that the companies decided they want to sponsor, and so in cases, like when I joined Arrows, guys like Peter Volwater, Ant Baker, Karen Yagi, these were the guys I was working with. It wasn't a case of I would like to work with this. This is what we were given, and you have to work with these guys. Everyone was pretty professional. It doesn't matter whether it was Anders, Bjorn, even Robbie. When I was working with Gaastra, I had an opportunity to work with Robbie in sort of 91, 92. He came down and stayed with us for a few days in Perth, and
How is it to work?
They're only going to get the answers out of people if you ask them the right questions. If you're going to say, if I said to one of the sailors, how was that sail? And you get an answer that says, well, it was good or it was bad. Well, that's not the right question. You've got to start with what was good, what was bad? Is it, too much backhand pressure? Was it unstable? I guess you kind of get to go back and the guys that couldn't give you enough feedback, I wouldn't pull one person out more than another that was good or bad.
Who was good at it then? Maybe that's the best way to go. Who's the best at sort of feedback and feel, and who you remember?
Well, I worked with Anders for a long time, and Anders had a good feeling for what he was looking for all the time. So it was, that was definitely one of the highlights. I mean, working with Ant and Baker back in sort of, I guess 99, 2000, that was always interesting. But there's some guys who they could go fast regardless what they were doing. Didn't matter how good the sail was. So, we did. I remember one year. I mean, that's a picture of 90. I think early 90s, maybe 94, of an advert that Gaastra ran in a magazine. That picture, I can't zoom in on that, but the picture on that on the right hand side is half me, half Anders.
Ah, yes, on the right.
If you zoom in nice and tight, you'll see that Anders' half body on the right and my half face on the left.
I'll see. Unfortunately, I can't zoom in, but while you guys are talking, I'll see if I can
crop it.
Fucking do it.
Yeah, I guess it was good with Anders, but then we did a test back in the I guess it would have been late 80s, maybe 1990, between Bjorn and Anders, and when those two guys were doing sail testing, whoever was in front would stay in front.
Really?
They were both working for NeilPryde at the time, and many times where we did tests in Hawaii, in Maui, and the only time one would pass the other is if one made it, the guy in front made a mistake.
That's it. That is super interesting because obviously those two have probably the biggest rivalry in windsurfing history, and obviously Bjorn was the guy to come out on top. In terms of history results and how people remember it. It's interesting you say that. So they were on the same team. I sometimes forget that they were on the NeilPryde team together. So do those guys want something different each, in your experience?
I think they did. They had different ideas on what they wanted to achieve. Initially, when they both joined NeilPryde, I was making sales for both of them in the early days, and then I think after Bjorn won his first World Cup title in probably 87 or 88. I think Barry started making sales for him after that.
Okay. So you and Barry were working for NeilPryde at the same time?
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, there was back in that sort of era. It was Barry. Monty was with us as well. We had Monty Spindler also working there at the same time. So there was three of us, and I guess Jeff Bourne was involved as well. So. Yeah, we had a fairly big team of designers, and we were all working on different projects. Like, I guess I was doing the warp speed or the RAF race, and the World Cup race, and I think Barry was doing the RAF race or something like that. I can't remember exactly the model name, but we were doing two different versions of a racing sail for two different people. Now all you need to do is make that bigger so you can see it.
Yeah, no, I tried. It's saved like that, so sorry, can't get it.
Do you remember the videos, like the NeilPryde videos? Because as growing up, they were my Christmas present. Every year, without fail, Christmas Day, I would have the new NeilPryde video. And fast forward, so that would have been when you were designing for NeilPryde. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Rob Masters was doing all the filming. Back in those days, they didn't have drones, and they used helicopters for a lot of that photo shoot.
Yeah.
They had one guy in a helicopter, Rob Masters in a helicopter, and Daryl Wong in the water, and it was crazy days back in those days.
Still, some of the best videos is not fast forward, but the later one when they're trashing the sails. Were you still working for
replay?
Yeah, I was action replay. Yeah.
How did that feel when you? So I've always wanted to know this. Did they use the production sails for those clips, or were you making like throwaway sails?
No, they were well. They would have been the first in a production run that we were making. So it would have been the first ones, and the idea is not to make 10 sails the same color, but try to make 10 sails in different colors and different sizes to suit different conditions. And see, that was me working with Bjorn. That was in Lake Garda, that photo. That was a long time ago.
Yeah. Yeah, tell us about that time too, because obviously Bjorn and Anders were battling, but in the end, Bjorn obviously got more titles and pretty much dominated. So, I mean, I think they were both.
I think I have an idea that they were given. I think Anders was given the choice if he wanted to work with Barry Spanier or to work with me, because then whoever Anders chose, Bjorn was going to get Barry Spanier. So that's how it worked out. It was just
So did you two get in like an arms race, the two designers and sailors? I mean, I
think Neil was happy to have that sort of 1 and 2 in the world using his sails. It was when you say an arms race, we still shared ideas and shared materials and manufacturing processes, but we were doing two very different things because we had two different people. It wasn't necessarily about me trying to make a better sail than Barry. It was about me making the best sail I could for Anders.
So let me just clear this up. So obviously Monty, you, And there's obviously about 4
That's
or whatever designers. Your design sales, but there's a production race sale. There's only one production race sale.
No, we had 2 production race sales.
So you had 2 production race sales, and one was for Bjorn almost, and one was for. Okay,
One was, one for
as
one
a
for
kid,
one for
I
Anderson.
don't remember that. That's interesting.
I could probably dig up a catalog, but they do exist.
So what did Bjorn? Do you remember the name? There was one was a World Cup.
It might have just been. No, I don't remember the name. It might have been a World Cup race. It might have.
Yeah.
Mm.
World
Oh,
Cup
yeah.
slalom, World Cup race.
Oh, they were cool. I love those sales.
Yeah,
That is interesting, man.
Yeah, and you had the super cam. That's what you called the cam? They called it a super cam, didn't they?
That
like
might
the
have been the one. That might have been the one that Barry did. I guess. Yeah, I really don't remember. We used to we'd sit around meetings and talk about things that we were doing, but a lot of the time they were working on one project and we were working on a different project. So I guess
that's so cool that you don't see that anymore.
No.
I was based in Australia and he was based in Maui, so we weren't really we weren't copying each other, and we
that's cool.
Whatever there was being marketed, I suppose, as Bjorn's sale or Anders sale.
Yeah.
And what was the vibe like between Anders and Bjorn? Because obviously I remember as a kid they'd sort of in the magazines you'd get this sense that they're battling each other and they don't like each other, and there's they're trying to create this sort of rivalry. Was there any truth to any of that? Or
I think it was all on the water. When they came off the water, it was all drink
all handshakes.
Partying together, we were sharing the same storage facilities when we were at World Cup events, and I think it's like anything, you battle on the water, and then when you come off the water, you're mates.
I have a question. Again, this is your take. You can choose to answer it or not. You said that when they have their testing and one's faster than the other, they never overtake each other. They're both quick. Why is it then that Bjorn won so many times over Anders? What do you think what was the missing thing for Anders? In your just opinion, whether it means.
I think if Bjorn got to the front at the start of a race, then he would win the race. It was simple as that. The only times that one person would beat the other is if the other person would make a mistake or an error. In a slalom race, especially slalom racing, in waves, whether it's in Maui or Japan or anything, those guys hit a bit of chop as you're rounding a mark, and you lose speed. Those guys need to be able to power through the jibe at full speed and come out full speed and be, the slightest slip up and the guy behind you notice it, you're done for.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you see any videos of racing, especially in Maui, I suppose, actually anywhere, because it would happen in Germany, it would happen in Silt, it would happen at the Omazaki World Cup. It happens anytime I've seen footage. One guy just hit a bit of chop and mistime a landing. These guys need to keep the board in the water and keep it going at full speed, and do a jibe incorrectly, a fall, face plant.
Yeah. Bob's got an interesting question, and I mean it makes sense. What were the differences between the two sails? Did you use the other sail and then?
We had a chance to look at it from time to time, but the main differences, I suppose, between the sails that Barry made were quite a lot flatter than the sails I made.
Okay.
Mine were sort of fuller overall. That'd be my assessment of the main difference. We're talking about an awful long time ago. We're talking about sails that were designed 35 years ago.
Wow.
I haven't kept the records of what we were doing at the time. But from memory, I think the main difference was that his sails were a bit flatter, which probably made them faster. But then, in a straight line faster, but then slower out of the turns. So
yeah. And what were you designing it on?
Sorry?
It's going to sound stupid, but I can't even remember back that far. Did we have computers then? It wasn't CAD design, was it? It was
during the 80s was we were working on CAD through the 80s. A lot of stuff was still being drawn on a drawing board with a set square and pencil and paper. But I remember working with a guy in Melbourne back in sort of the late 80s, sort of 88, I suppose, 88, 89, where we transferred a lot of that onto a design program.
Okay. I was going to say I've lost track of the years when computers were more sort of commonplace, and then like I confuse it with the internet being commonplace, which is obviously two different things.
Well, it makes sense. I guess it makes sense to me because I lived in Hong Kong until 1988, and then I moved down here in about October '88, and I was doing it while I was living in Australia because I was obviously based in Perth, and the guy that was doing our programming was based in Melbourne. And so I would go and spend a week or two at a time with him, because he knew how to write programs, but he didn't know what we were looking for in a program. So when you put a line on a piece of paper, where do you go next? That's going to be the mast. Now, where's the sort of the clue going to be, and how do you find that point? So yeah, and then you sort of turn a flat piece of paper into a three-dimensional object, and he had the technology for all that. So I used to spend quite a bit of time over there, and he used to come to my place in Perth to help write that program.
Yeah.
So you go, Benny.
No, it's all right.
So what year did you go from NeilPryde to Gaastra again?
91.
Yeah, so you're involved with the Slalom Foil Pro and the Course Foil Pro.
Absolutely.
Sales.
That picture that you had up there was I think that was the, I was doing both of those.
Yeah, cool. Because I've got a quick little story, but I'm going to give a shout out here. But my uncle he doesn't anymore, but he used to have a windsurf shop in the Netherlands, and it was called Van Bellen Surfing. It's still there today. I mean, they kept the name, but my uncle no longer owns the business. But when I was 15 years old, I had a Bombora shortboard, and I had pretty crappy sails, and like the gear was pretty average. Because everything was super expensive. You had to. I was a kid, I couldn't afford it all. My parents would help me with stuff, but anyway. One Christmas, I'll never forget it. A box turns up from the Netherlands, like a sail box, and out pops. And I've actually got a picture of the sail. It's not my sail. I just found it online.
Oh yeah.
This exact sail, Slalom Foil Pro.
Yeah, that looks like something we would have done. Absolutely.
Yeah, it was exact that sail. It was that color, and literally, I mean, I was on cloud 9. I had a crappy raft sail thing that was probably 10 years old, 15 years old. It was a 7-meter thing. He sent me a 5.7. I unrolled it. It was like unrolling gold, because that thing was like the most expensive sail back in the day. And I used it for the next 5 years or something. The problem was I had a fiberglass mast or some crappy mast or whatever it was. And of course, to use that sail, well, it doesn't work. You need the high-end carbon mast. So then I had to go and buy that thing. But anyway, for the next 5 years, that's all I used, that sail on my Bombora plastic slalom board. And I was just ripping around this lake that I learnt on. And I have really good memories of that sail. I mean, if I sailed it now, I can't even remember what it'd be like. But at the time, I remember just feeling like I was in the World Cup sailing around.
That probably has my signature or my autograph on the bottom.
Yeah,
that black black mark is a tear in the sail.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And look, that's why I said at the start of this podcast, this is so weird for me. I never imagined 30 years later, here I am on a podcast with Mr. Legend Windsurfing himself and you, Willie, talking about the sail that I used as a kid. It's kind of weird. It's all a bit strange for me. But I'm glad that we're having this conversation. And thank you for designing it. As you can see, it has that classic Gaastra logo. That's why I'm so attached to it. Because when I was a kid, I love that logo. I just loved it, So it's anyway. It's thanks for that, mate. That's my little story about that sail.
No problem.
What's your sail you're most proud of? Do you have one? that you think this was the, like you finish it, I don't know, it wins races or it doesn't, or it does something, or anything that you remember?
I guess there's been a few. I guess in racing sales, probably the one that first Cambridge sale was one of the ones that that was a highlight. It was very successful.
Yeah.
And probably a second one would be that impact wave sail that we did for arrows because
That was a six.
I get I guess you sort of have to sit back and think, how do you judge this? Do you judge this based on races that were won or a success of a sail by how many they sold? Yeah. And I think the impact was a that's exactly the sail. That's the one.
That's the aerial, because I had that one. The impact was before it.
The impact and aerial, I think, were at the same sort of time. I think the difference, the one was that they were different. I think the impact had a longer mast and shorter boom, and the aerial was sort of a more, let's say, a bump and jump type of sail at the time.
Yeah.
But
the impact, I can tell you now. The impact, I just finished my Olympic campaign. Didn't make Sydney. I was in New Caledonia, and I was like, I'm going to learn to forward loop when I go home. Like, I didn't really wave sail much, and I was like, okay. So I rung up like Boardwise Grand Prix at the time in the England. I said, right, I need some wave stuff. And then he spoke to Dave White, and he goes, right, I've organised you, and I got this JP245, the yellow one, and I got a quiver of arrow sails. I think it was like 4.2, 4.7 or something like this. And that was like my first wave gear where I learned to forward loop on. So I have like the fondest memories. I literally went home my first day wave sailing, and I learned to loop that day. I was like, I was so past ready. I'd learned in 2000. So the impact must have been in 2000 because I learned on it. So I learned to forward loop 2000, and I'm pretty sure, how was 2000? I was 22. So I should have forward looped probably 7 years earlier, but no one had ever, like nowadays, it's so, you just do this, There's internet videos, there's everything else. But back then, the forward loop was like still, oh my God, you're crazy if you can forward loop. Only the best guys in the world, like it was kind of this thing. Whereas actually, when someone told me, put your hand back, look back, bring your leg up, I was like, oh, it's actually really relatively easy once you go for it. So yeah,
well, the best ones are the stalled forwards, when the guys do it, hang in the air for quite a long time, and then almost wait till they're on the way down before they actually start the rotation process.
Yeah, 100%. But yeah, I've got some good memories of that sail. And if I remember rightly, I mean, Francisco, I think, even used one of the first ones for an extra year. I don't know if there was some other politics involved in it, but was it okay? No, I thought there might be. So yeah, it was super interesting.
There's some good comments here. I'll try and go in sort of chronological order. Yeah, Bob's asked here, at what point did monofilm take over?
Gosh, mid 80s. I would put a rough date in around sort of 85-ish. It's kind of we weren't using monofilm in Ireland, and so that was 83, 84. I was living in Ireland, 83, 84. So it would have been after that, and I'm pretty sure it would have been 85 was when we started introducing it first of all, into race sails and then into wave sails.
Yeah. Okay. So that was obviously a pretty big advancement in materials, wasn't it? It made everything stiffer and lighter. Yeah.
Well, not so much the weight, but more stability.
Okay.
We talked about it at NeilPryde as being omnidirectional. So it was, like a woven fabric has a sort of a stretch in one direction, lesser stretch in the other direction, and more stretch on the what they call the bias. But monofilm didn't have that. It was just omnidirectional. It was the same in every direction. So it's just more stable fabric to work with.
Yep. No, that's That's pretty important. And then we've got a question here regarding will the next generation of sails continue to get more floppy loose at the top?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's all about twist. It's all about twist, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever going to.
Yeah.
It's never going to go away.
Yeah, I feel like they're pretty refined now. When you say, Ben, with the whole twist, I mean, they've sort of probably nailed that. I imagine to a point.
I think mass to me have made a big difference. You know, like how they're reacting with the sails. Like, I think there was a point where, again, I don't know. I'm not a sail designer, but I feel like it can be almost visually tighter now, but the way it twists off is still got that. It depends. Depends
called
what
a release.
Yeah, release. There we go.
Yeah. And then
again, this depends what we're talking about. If you're talking about foiling or you're talking about, you know, normal sailing, because the drag involved with normal sailing, you need more release, and then with foiling, there's obviously less. So there is a lot of things at play, and I think we're going to see things change in foiling a bit. Obviously, they've gone way more high aspect. I mean, that was interesting. What do you take on that? Have you looked much at the foiling stuff? Because when they first came out, it went super high aspect, and then I saw people using those sails on normal kit, and I was like, oh, actually, that kind of works, but we need to. So there's kind of been a little bit of a jiggle around as well from that sense.
Yeah, no, I haven't been involved in it at all. I was offered an opportunity, but yeah, I'm probably more of a traditionalist. So
hey,
you know, when it comes to sail design and stuff, you know, my background was in big boat sails initially, and then windsurfing sails. I see you've got a guy called Mike Seward on there asking if I was involved with the Total Flow F1. I certainly was.
Okay.
Yeah, tell us about that.
That Total Flow was that one with the flexible top. That was what that's what the product became called, was the Total Flow.
I remember it. Yeah, I'll see if I can. While you're talking, I'll see if I can find a picture for anyone who's not aware of it.
Well, I guess the best picture I see repeatedly on sort of Facebook and other places is the picture of Finian Maynard. He was also one of the guys that we worked with. You know, there were guys like Finian. You know, I would say he was a good guy to work with. But some guys, there was definitely guys, and I'm not pointing a finger at Finian, but there were guys that didn't know. You know, they couldn't decide what they wanted. You know, they wanted. There were definitely times where I got the runaround from guys thinking, "Oh, I want this. Oh no, I want that. No, I don't know what I want. You make it happen for me." Finian wasn't one of those guys. I'm not going to say any names, but they'll stay preserved.
I found a picture.
The Total Flow F1 was something that was a project that had that flexible top.
I think that's the sail I remember, like iconically from those later 90s, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Late 97, 98, 99. There you go. That's a classic. That's a classic photograph of Finian on the Total Flow F1. Yeah, one of the best shots I've. Whenever I see it, it just gives me goosebumps.
Wow. So obviously,
Finian was a classic. I remember, you know, taking him to the airport in Perth one time, and he showed up with way too much excess baggage, and the guy said, if you can't drag it through the airport, we're not going to put it on the aircraft. And he said, I'll put it on the aircraft for you. And they argue with them nonstop. And they said, just go home and repack your bags and don't come back with a lighter bag. You know, Finian in those days used to not only sail, but travel with a weight vest and a weight jacket. And, you know, he was crazy.
Right.
Crazy.
It's pretty hardcore. I'm also looking at the board. It looks like a freaking narrow gunny slalom board thing, speedboard looking thing. It was pretty gnarly. But so what's the deal? So what was involved to rig this sail? I mean, obviously it's flexible at the top. So what did you need to rig this?
It was basically a two-part. So the main mast in this picture here, the main mast stopped at the top batten, and then the thing that when we did the first prototypes, we just used like a fishing rod in that top section. But when we put it into production, I think we used a specific sort of rod that you had to have a regular curve rather than sort of being like a mast that has a progressive curve. This was just a straight curved tip section that went into a piece in the top of the mast, a metal thing.
It was interesting because Gun Sales brought out something similar recently, like kind of re-brought it out. You know, that bow sail I think they had. But it doesn't seem to have taken off. What was the downside of that? Because I also spoke to Thomas Pearson from Simmer as well, because they had this similar thing with the Cyber Race, which kind of had that flexible top which came down. I think he was saying it got overpowered quickly, but it had a lot of light wind. But maybe yours is a little different.
We never had any problems. I mean, that picture of Finian is actually racing on the speed course. That logo on there, the cat logo, is the speed course. So I'm guessing, it's more likely to be he was in a speed situation than in a slalom race.
It looks narrow, the board. I mean, it was definitely narrow back then, but that looks super. Ace boards, I remember them. That was kind of when course racing was starting to take, like, shortboard course racing in the UK. There was AHD, Ace came out with something, and there was a few other boards lower. It brings back a few memories there. I mean, someone asked the same question I was going to bring up anyway, but what are you doing now? Obviously, you did you after Arrows, which was early 2000s? When did
2005. I finished up there in 2005. They basically, I think they decided that was all, the part of Boards and More, and I think they just decided that they wanted to consolidate a lot of their brands. I think they got the feeling at that point that windsurfing was starting to slow down as a whole, and they decided they wanted to consolidate. I mean, that's when I sometimes question the decision that they took, because they could have kept the Arrows name alive. It wouldn't have cost them anything. I mean, I presume that the license fee to use the North name wouldn't have been cheap, and so to keep the North name at the time and get rid of Arrows was a strange one. But look, there's corporate decisions and things happen in the background that I don't know the answers to,
but going back.
So they saw the right thing. They saw the writing on the wall and decided to close down Fanatic and Arrows and a bunch of other brands and other products they were doing. I guess at the time I was actually taking an interest, and I spent every time I was in Maui, I used to go cycling with guys like Micah Buzianis and Peter Slate and a lot of the guys that live over there. I used to go cycling with them regularly, and Micah's dad and things. And I got more and more interested in cycling. Cycling was starting to, I saw it as a sport that you could do every single day. There was no reason you couldn't go cycling, where there was a lot of reasons. If there wasn't enough wind, you wouldn't go windsurfing. Most of the windsurfing events had a 15-knot minimum. So, at least in Perth, we didn't have that problem, but in a lot of other places, I went to World Cup events in La Torche and Silt and places like that, where you might sit 10 days and have no wind. And, you just sit at 12 knots, and the guys would go, "Sorry, we're not racing. It's not windy enough." I guess it's sort of an opportunity came up to get involved in the bike industry, and so I opened up a shop with a friend, and I'm still doing it today.
Oh, really? Okay. So you must have killed it in COVID, because everyone I know sold out of bikes.
I can show you a picture of our shop that at the time was completely, we had no bicycles. We had nothing. We had the place that normally would have ranked 40 bikes. There was nothing.
Oh, right.
Empty racks in the store. Yeah.
I got a few mates involved in the biking industry. I mean, just in COVID anyway, I think everything sold out everywhere, but biking especially was going mental. No one could get anything. So okay, that's in. So you're involved still with the shop, not on a design thing, just in terms of a shop.
Yeah, retail. I'm involved in retail.
Okay, so we got some e-bikes in there.
Absolutely.
Are you a big fan?
It's the big, probably the biggest mover in the marketplace.
I'll be honest, my guilty pleasure is a bit of e-biking. I've got a specialized Evo, and I have to say, someone said this. I remember this quote. It's like, it's the best invention since mountain biking. Or it's the biggest, like e-biking. I'm a massive fan, so it will take a lot to dissuade me. Everyone who comes to me is going, yeah, you don't need an e-bike. I think it is quite
that's super cool.
Yeah, no, and the product that you're riding is definitely a good, it's a good brand. They make they're the front end of the pointy end of the sport. I actually sell trek bikes, not specialized, but that's okay. It doesn't really matter. They all make good products.
Yeah. And interestingly, I don't know if this relates to windsurfing, but I've always thought this with biking. How difficult can it be? Like, I know this sounds ridiculous, but you're a designer, and I'm always interested to hear this. And maybe it doesn't relate to windsurfing because I think there's a lot more going on. But with biking, right? Surely, let's say Trek are the best bikes in the world. Why can't someone just copy that frame exactly, which I'm sure they can, because all the componentry is bought from the outside. Like, it's not like windsurfing. In windsurfing, you kind of design all these bits and you produce your own bit. Whereas in biking, you're literally just designing the frame. And then I look at myself and I think of geometry and all this stuff, and you think, is it that difficult?
It's an interesting question. I know windsurfing sales. I'm just going to tell you quickly. The warning come up on my computer that says your computer is about to restart in 14 minutes remaining before it restarts automatically. So I'm not sure.
Cancel.
I'm hitting the snooze button and it won't snooze. So it might. If I disappear, you'll know why.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
I guess I've seen sales be copied quite easily. It's no. You know what? It's interesting you say that, but bicycles are just triangles, just like a sail.
Yeah.
The geometry is the critical part. You can make let's say a cheap bike, and it ride like absolute shit. So it's the same with sails. If you don't understand why you're copying or doing a certain thing, then it's not going to make it any better or worse.
But in windsurfing, can you copy a sail? Like, how? Just out of interest, how do you copy
you're
a
not
sail?
achieving anything because you don't understand why you're doing a certain thing. Whether there's a lot you can do to make it exactly the same. Yeah, it's easy if you want to.
So, would you unstitch a whole sail? Because I've heard someone talk about this years ago.
I've heard it be done. Yeah, I know that people have done that, and it's quite common, I suppose, in some factories in China that they would do that.
What, they would just literally unstitch every panel, and then measure the panels and then recreate it.
Yeah.
Wow, it's interesting.
It's probably but you're not achieving anything sensible. It's it's.
Because you don't. Yeah.
You're doing it for the wrong reasons. You're doing it for commercial reasons, not because you know how to design a sail. It's a bit like a bicycle. You can copy the geometry of a bicycle and get it close to the same, but if you don't get it spot on, then it rides weird and you're wasting your time. I think there are companies in China doing that. There's you probably, I don't know if you've heard of a brand of bike called the Pinarello bike. Well, in China they're making them and they're coming out in the shops. People are calling it a Chinarello, a Chinese version of Italian brand.
Yeah, they're very expensive, aren't they? Pinarellos, super high end.
High end Italian brand.
Yeah, would it be just with the? I actually used to work in the bike industry too, Willie, and I remember thinking when I was in it that it was just a what do you call it? Like there was just way too many brands almost. It was like it felt like there was just a million brands. but obviously there's a few that kind of rise to the top through marketing and branding and everything you need to do to run a business. But the bike industry is pretty notorious for having a million brands that you've never heard of that are just all over the world, isn't it? It's
Oh yeah, we see a lot of strange things coming through the doors that have names.
Yeah.
People just copied from another. They copied something and changed one letter, and I think, oh, what a. But there's if a bike, if something's going to fall apart, then that's the sort of thing where the copies and rip-offs are the ones that are notorious for having problems.
Yeah,
no,
like you say, it's interesting because in windsurfing, I guess because we're such a small sport, we don't see much of that kind of rip-off brands. I think we're going to see it in winging. You're going to see that, and they're going to be the ones that are flopping around all over the place. Out of interest, are you still windsurfing? Is it obviously? Are you still involved? Are you interested in it? What's your sort of current status with windsurfing?
I am not currently doing any windsurfing. I still enjoy sailing because I'm a water person. I'm a water boy. I mean, last July, I helped a friend sail a boat from Fiji back to Brisbane. It just turns out that guy used to be the Gaastra designer. So we actually kind of grew up, and that's how that's in a way that's how the industry is. We virtually grew up together and have known each other our entire lives. We lived in the same suburb as kids, as like 5-year-olds, and we went to the same primary school, the same secondary school. We went through the no, please don't shut down. Oh shit,
Willie.
Yeah, I'm still here. Don't worry. A thing popped up on my screen saying you're about to be signed out of your computer. So if I disappear, you'll know why.
Okay. Yeah. And there's no cancel button.
Well, I have to ask then.
There's a snooze button down the bottom right-hand corner, but it won't let me snooze it. So
damn.
What's like the biggest? Because if you're not windsurfing, do you miss it? Do you miss going windsurfing? Do you ever think, how?
You know what? For a while, I didn't. I didn't miss it initially because I guess the circumstances surrounding what happened with the shutdown of Arrows was very strange, and so I didn't miss it for a few years. But I do miss it. I do miss it, and I do miss being on the water, and I enjoy getting out. I go down to where the guys windsurf, either down at Dutch Inn or North Beach.
Yeah.
And often catch up with the guys who all look at me and go, "I know who you are." And it's like, yeah, that's right. Right. Look, I do. I miss it more now than I did initially. I guess the circumstances left a bit of a bad taste in my mouth. And
any interest in having a go on the LT?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, cool.
It's hard because I work a proper job as well these days. The hard part is finding the time to do it.
Yeah, because I went down in Perth, the Netherlands Sailing Club. I went there a couple of years ago when there was just a local regatta, and I was actually really surprised how many people showed up. There was about 30 or 40 people, and they opened up the shed, and there was like 50 LT boards in there. I was like, wow, this is super cool.
Yeah. No, there's no reason that it will ever. I guess the new product will keep going. There's enough people alive still and interested in the product and in that type of sailing that it should keep going. And I'm interested to see who shows up for the World Championships in 2 weeks' time. It's a social. I think you said at the beginning, Ben. It's a social thing, and it's a community sport, community activity. I guess the problem is that for people who don't have a car, transporting that board home at the end of the day is next to impossible. So you need to find a clubhouse or a facility somewhere where you can leave it for those younger people. I guess that there's always the problem that when people progress, there has to be something for them to do with that. Like with the one design, if it's racing, they can progress on that. Whereas I guess younger people, like the 10 to 15-year-olds, once they've progressed on that, they want to go faster. They want to start jumping it. They want to start doing things. And that's where it has limitations if you're not racing it.
Yeah, it's interesting, like you say. Yeah, I think you have to be racing if you're on that sort of gear. Like that's the attraction for me, like the racing side of it, the community side of it. And even I think when I went to the Worlds in Perth, Mistral Worlds '97, I think it was, there was the Wallies were still going then. Like I think after the Worlds in Perth, like I think it was Production Board Worlds and Mistral Olympic like One Design Worlds, and then there was the Windsurfer Worlds or something back then. So it's kind of interesting. It's quite a strong community in Australia for the like Wally or whatever they.
Well, I think we have perfect conditions for outdoor water sports. You know, it's a mecca for water sports.
But again, the Wally that works anywhere.
Yeah, same, pretty much the same concept.
Yeah. I think it's super cool. There's a couple of questions here I thought I'd try to answer as well. Bob's asking.
So you know what I was going to suggest we do? I was actually going to suggest let this computer restart itself, and I'll come back because I don't want to say I'm going to jump out, but rather than get cut off in the middle of a sentence.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's restart it and come back in 5 minutes. You know, hopefully in 5 minutes it'll be back and running. I don't think it's going to take.
Yeah, no worries.
How does that sound?
Well, I think
you're not going to disappear. You're not in a rush to go.
No, but the only problem is if it's doing some update and it could take I've been on those.
No, I think it's just going to do a restart. It just says your computer must restart to complete the installation of an application.
I would just leave it. I don't think it'll.
No, it's gonna happen.
If it's gonna happen, then restart.
It's gonna happen because I can't snooze it. I can't close the box. But I mean, I guess you've got a question there. The simple answer is, the sail design definitely is influenced by the board design because you wouldn't take a One Design sail, for example, and put it onto a waveboard or vice versa. So the board design has a huge impact on what. I guess I see it more and more these days in the bike industry. The tires that are on the bike determine what you can do with the bike. And it's almost like it doesn't matter if you've got skinny road tires, that bike's never going to go off road. And if it's got big ass knobbly mountain bike tires, you're not going to go riding on you're not going to use it as a road bike. So it's the same sort of thing. I think the in this particular instance, in this particular question that's there is that sail design is influenced by the board design to a large extent.
Yeah.
It's interesting because when I did a bit of testing for BoardSeeker back, when was it, sort of 2000s or whatever it was, we were doing quite a bit of what you found, and which I didn't realize before, which sounds ridiculous, but I'd never really been involved with that side of it, is it makes a huge difference is if you're just going to go out and buy a Mistral board or whatever, like let's say a Fanatic board or a whatever, when you're going to buy a North sail or you're going to buy a Gaastra sail or a NeilPryde sail, they don't necessarily go together. Like they really don't. Like there was some boards that I found needed a sail to lift them up. So the board was pretty planted, and then you'd need a sail that had a little bit of lift. And then there was other boards which were like pretty flighty. They were like the Fanatic rings, when we were testing anyway, was quite a flighty board, and you needed a lot of downforce in the sail to kind of keep that board in control. So if you got like the Fanatic back in the day with the flighty sail that lifted up, it was horrendous to control. And then equally, if you had a board that sat quite low and had a lot of control and whatever, and you had a sail that pushed down as well, that thing just, you couldn't get any lift. Obviously changing fins and stuff like that, you could have a mess around with, but definitely in the modern sort of slalom stuff, or I guess it's not modern now because it's foiling, but there was definitely some combos that didn't work. And I've seen guys that have changed sponsors and maybe got the combo wrong because they went chasing the money and it didn't work. Like, it was quite interesting, actually. I don't know how many people notice it from the outside, but definitely when you're involved with it and you hear these things and you start looking at it, and it's quite an interesting thought, actually.
Yeah.
not everything goes together. And I guess the same with masts. What's your take on masts and sails? You know, when you're designing a sail, you're obviously designing around a specific mast.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Yeah, look, that's always been the bane of my life during the windsurfing days. Is people using necessarily the wrong mast sail and saying it's got wrinkles or it's got a flat spot here or a cool spot there or something. The curve, getting the curve exactly right to match the sail design is sometimes
This is actually brings up a discussion as well, because we talk about the original triangle windsurfer, then it developed battens, camber inducers. But from my memory, I witnessed in my lifetime where windsurfing, the popularity started to drop off, but then the technical aspect of all the gear just kept going more and more and more, to the point where I think it may have either confused or turned a few people off the sport, because it all just started going really Formula One.
Yeah.
And, I remember I was like, oh, you've got to have that mast. If you don't have that mast, that sail's not going to work. And, this and that. And everyone's just going, oh, God, I've got to buy a whole thing. And, I think that was a part of, it was a natural development. Obviously, gear was getting better and everyone wants to see the gear get better. But the downside of it was that the extra technicalities of it turned a few people off too, didn't it? Yeah. And now it's going full circle with this LT, going back to the simple thing. Which is, it's interesting to see that that timeline. Yeah. So it's it's something that's been talked about a fair bit with the whole windsurfing thing. So it's
So do you follow the racing at the moment? Do you watch windsurfing, like live stream style stuff or videos, or are you just totally out of it? He's gone. I think that was the restart.
We'll leave come back. We'll see if he comes back. But it's fascinating, isn't it, Ben? I love talking to these guys because people like Willie, they literally are responsible for what we have now as windsurfing. They were turning it from the triangle sail to the modern shaped sail. It's pretty much the reason we're sailing on good gear is because of guys like Willie. It's a bit weird. If it was another sport, they probably put him some Hall of Fame or, Willie probably works in a bike shop and everyone walks in and has got no idea that he's had such a huge impact with
that's the funny thing. Oh, look at this. We've got a super chat. It's our first super chat. Oh, look at this.
Oh, there you go.
Wade, what a legend. Loving the podcast.
Thanks, Wade. That goes straight into Ben's pocket. That's cool.
Wade in the pocket.
That's amazing.
Cheers, Wade.
That's awesome. Thank you, Wade. There you go.
A legend.
But you were saying though.
No, I was saying this is the really mad, not the mad thing, but when you are in different industries, you can meet someone who is an absolute legend of that sport, that industry, whatever. And if you're not connected with it, you wouldn't have a clue. I'd be the same with bands. Like, let's be honest, there could be the most famous band in the world. Yeah. And the guy, I could meet the lead singer. I would never know. And, someone else meets me. Oh my God, and you don't know what they've done. It could be a producer. It could be someone who's organized, like something that's just massive. Some of these big companies, and it's the same with windsurfing, they've changed the sport, but you wouldn't know necessarily what they've done, who they are. They're just working in the bike shop. You're like talking about biking. It's I find it super interesting.
It happens a lot, and I'm sure it's not just exclusive to windsurfing, but this story has been repeated a few times in windsurfing. A lot of people that laid the foundation are not necessarily involved right now, but they're the reason we're here as well. I actually have been thinking about this a fair bit lately when I go windsurfing. I was talking to someone the other day. I said, I feel like we're actually living in a bit of a golden age of windsurfing right now, because you've got this great gear and the crowds are not a problem. Well, not where I am anyway. I don't know where everyone else is, but you can go to a good sailing spot, not a huge issue with crowds, and you've got the best gear there's ever been. It's basically, as far as I'm concerned, a bit of a kind of a golden age right now too.
I can totally see that. And again, you
Yeah.
see all these comments, and we've talked about it a lot on this channel anyway, is, how are you going to get more people into windsurfing? It's like, well, do you need more people into windsurfing? Like,
That's
and I
right.
know that's a selfish point of view. My only feeling is like, I want other people to
Share the
feel that
stoke.
energy, that buzz, that whatever. But you can do that in lots of other sports. But I genuinely believe, and then talking to Cribby the other day, about winging, and he's super excited about it, and fair play to him. But I went foiling the other day. I went winging, and it's just not the same as windsurfing. And
you can tell us that now that Guy's not on the podcast, tell us the truth. What do you think of winging, man?
I genuinely think it doesn't look great, but I can see why a lot of people are trying it, doing it, and I think in certain locations it will tick a lot of boxes, especially for the other windsurfers. But I think there's a massive amount of people who will gain way more from windsurfing, normal windsurfing. When I speak to Guy, it was interesting his take on it, and he was really adamant that he doesn't even want to kind of get people to bother learning to jibe and stuff. And I think he's forgetting that feeling of the rail, like what it's like for a new person into the sport, or someone who's trying to crack that carb jibe. That is such a cool feeling, and he says, oh, it's way harder than foiling. I don't think that's a negative. And I genuinely believe it isn't that hard. I think for a certain percentage of people, yeah, maybe certain things are harder, but I think you get more satisfaction when something is harder, when you finally tick it off. And there's something about being on a foil which doesn't feel as relaxing, to a certain person as actually windsurfing. Windsurfing, you're not up on there, you're not tootling around, you can relax, you don't have to think about keeping the board straight. You can just windsurf. And it is definitely a little less intense on the brain. When you're foiling in certain winds, obviously certain conditions, I think there's a bit of a, especially when you're trying to get into it. So I think some people don't even need to go through that. They might never go foiling, and that's totally fine. And if you want to, that's also fine. But I don't think we've got just because people are having a switch over and trying winging, and they're giving it all the one because it's the new big thing. I think you cannot forget how the feeling of windsurfing is. That is still an amazing feeling. Amazing. Yep. And I think like surfing, I was saying this, foil surfing's been out for a while. They're towing, they're pumping, they're whatever, but they're not just stopping surfing. The holy grail of surfing is still surfing. It's still rail turns and driving off the board, and listening to Cribby say, but it's a lot of drag and it's not very efficient and all that. I don't think that matters. That doesn't matter, because you get that feeling, and I think that is huge. But yeah, and again, there's no right and wrong, and if people want to go winging, that's totally up to them. But don't forget, if you're especially like Cribby, who's been windsurfing a long, long time, I think you can forget what those middle years are like, where you are achieving those full carb jibes, full planing on the edge of the fin. It's just such a good feeling.
Yeah. No, look, I agree, and that's why. Well, I was still windsurf, and why obviously you do too. Yeah, the thing with the foil too is, and I mean, maybe it's just me, but again, I'm at the beach the other day. It's 5 knots. There's a gradual slope with the sand. I'm thinking, well, I'm going to have to walk out a fair way to get the foil thing to work. With the beauty of that windsurfer or that LT, you just step on, push it into the water and beach start off, and it's very graceful. I find the foil, you got this big clunky thing, and you got to walk it around. It looks a bit Gumby. I mean, I don't know. It's me. I know the foil is cool in certain things, but just going back to just the simplicity and the kind of classic nature of the fin. You can go in shallow waters, and again, I think. We always talk about planing, like planing. You get up on the foil, you can plane. But I'm actually right now, and I love planing, I love wave sailing and stuff, but I am actually genuinely excited to try and get one of these LTs and sail around in 5 knots of wind. Like I'm actually wanting to get one, because the water is dead flat. You can just cruise around and just have some fun, and then I can teach some people, and it's all very relaxing, and people aren't getting sandblasted on the beach. Like maybe I'm getting old. Am I getting old, Ben? Maybe I'm getting old.
Yeah, you are getting old. You are getting old, but it's
I'll do both. I'll do both.
No, you're 100% true. I've always said this. Like, people have asked me that question, which is, you know, how we get windsurfing bigger. And I've said what you said before. The biggest problem is, in this day and age, people don't have the gear to teach people. Back when the LT was a thing, you had it. And if someone asked you, you went, yeah, go for a shot. When I got on my dad's Yipsy Whaler, or Whaler Yipsy, it was just there. I just got on it and tried to go sailing on it. And that's when I think actually stand-up paddles with the you know, thing in the inflatable ones, if you've got one of them in your shed, you can literally teach anyone. And it does double up. It doesn't take up too much room. You can stick it in the boot. There is a lot of thing to be said for those inflatable SUPs with the screw-in mount to get people on the water and teach a friend and to get them into it. But the LT makes sense. If I think, me personally, I would want a few people around. Well,
that's right.
A couple of you like cruising.
Yeah, and then you can like create like a little triangle course and just try and beat your mates, and you know, it's But again, like the other thing is, I've got a friend group here that don't windsurf, and we often talk about, oh well, you know, meet down on the beach for a picnic and hang out on a weekend. And I'm thinking, again, 5 knot day, I bring the windsurfer down. We're sitting down there with 5 people, guys and girls, and you can just have the windsurfer there and go, hey guys, who wants to go? Most of them will probably go, I'll have a go. It's never going to happen. They're never going to do it other than that. So anyway, this is not new, but I think that this will be, if you want to see more people do it, that this is going to have to be done. Well, you know, this sort of thing.
Yeah. But and also, you know, logistically, I honestly think the biggest way to get, and we was talking about this yesterday actually here, to someone on the beach, like, how do you get people more windsurfers? You need windsurfers at the beach, like the logistics, and that is the biggest barrier of entry. It's having the gear and having to transport the gear and rig it up. If you have a sailing club or a surf club or whatever it is with gear near the beach, like when I went to Lake Garda and the gear's just there and the water's there and you wonder why it's busy, it's like, it's just easy. It's just so accessible. It makes a massive difference, like a huge difference.
No, it's going to have to be sailing club. The infrastructure's there. There's a building on the water that stores gear. You're going to have to leverage that. And that's what Tilo's doing in the US, isn't he? He's been going to sailing clubs. And the sailing, no matter what country you're in, I mean, you know, most countries in the world have sailing clubs, whether it's on a lake or on the ocean, right? I mean, there's a lot of sailing clubs around, or even just like little, you know, little sheds or something. So no, that's cool. Well, as we get older, Ben, I'll probably see you at one of these, you know, LT events or something.
I'm totally in. Like,
you
know what I mean? My longboarding background, I've won a lot of longboarding competition. Like,
you might dominate.
I love it. I'm like, I was built for that thing.
But it's true, actually, because you complain about the weight in slalom, but LT could be the secret.
LT is perfect.
Yeah, you'll smash it.
I'm prime. But there's some, that's why I'm interested to see who turns up. I've actually looked at this race board stuff as well. Again, it's never going to be my one and only thing I do. But as you do get older and you want to go to these kind of events and stuff, that sort of longboard racing does appeal to my older, younger, whatever brain. I quite like the idea of a bit of tactical racing. Oh, hello! Guess who's back?
Computer restarted as scheduled.
Big Willie.
Big Willie.
We were just solving all the issues around getting people into windsurfing, Willie. So we don't have to touch on that too much anymore. But so Bob's got a
Gaastra heat wave. When was that? Was that your
heat wave?
I was working for Gaastra when that product was made, but I wasn't involved in the project.
What did you think as a sail designer?
Sorry?
I was going to say, what did you think of a sail designer with those little things on the leech?
Yeah. Look, some marketing people have some crazy ideas to try to. Yeah, I'm not sure there was any. Yeah. Um, there are more important things to talk about in life than those things.
As a kid, I always thought, "Wow, look at these things," and then as I got older and I see the older ones, I'm like, maybe not, maybe not.
I don't think there was any. It was more a graphic feature that was there to identify it.
100%.
It was a bit
So
of a fashion thing.
Pollock was on Gaastra.
Yeah, he was using the heat waves at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So, okay, give me your top 5 sailors of all time. Maybe that you've worked with, maybe that you've got any. I don't know. Just give us your top 5 sailors in your.
It's a hard one. There are some too. Guys like Nick Baker. I worked with. I had a friendship with guys like that, and I probably still do.
Yeah.
Nick's a good lad. Anders was a good lad. Bjorn. It's hard to go past the 3 big guys. Robbie, Bjorn, Anders, Nick. So when you say 5, I mean it doesn't leave much.
Okay, you can name 10 if you want. Like give us some underrated sailors. Just it's kind of interesting to look back and think, because I think there's a lot of sailors that probably people won't even mention the names of these days, and maybe you're thinking, "Wow, that guy," or someone maybe who was so good but just never, or just gave up. You sometimes.
Well, you know what? I don't want to even say gave up. You know what? There are 2 people that come to mind. Well, you know what comes to mind? I've worked with so many people from the early One Design days, Wing Glider days, people like Rhonda Smith, Court Larned, Ken Winner. There's been different eras all the way along the line, and they're all good people. There isn't, I'd be hard pressed to tell you any bad stories about any of these people. They're all good people.
Good stories.
Those are the early days. There's Thomas Person. Guys like Jan Vanguard, who was a Division 2 sailor. I was making Division 2 sails at one stage as well, and there's guys like that. But then I sort of look at some of the catalogs that were done over the years, and I guess the 2 names that jump out at me that are probably missing from our sport. A guy like Angus Chater. He was a pioneer of the sport that died, took his own life.
Okay. I've actually never heard of him, Willie. Who was that?
Angus Chater. It's actually an English windsurfer who in about 90 maybe 80 something, early 90s. It would have been late 80s, early 90s, late 80s, maybe even 87.
Yeah.
86, 87. He was a wave sailor out of UK. I can't remember what part of UK, but he moved to Maui. He sailed at Diamond Head, and he was held underwater for more than 10 minutes, and he was taken to hospital, and as he didn't have any breath left, and actually came back to life after being taken to hospital. And it seemed I had dinner with him and Anders and Tom Ledecky about a week before he decided that he wanted to go back to where he was supposed to be, and so he took his own life. And so guys like that who were pioneers, he was one of the first people ever to put back in the sort of the mid that 86 period to be putting camera on the top of a windsurfing mast and taking aerial shots from the top of the mast.
Oh wow!
Okay.
But primarily at Diamond Head, but then he moved over to Maui, and I think the actual reasons for why he decided to take his life are unclear. I am aware of what happened, and so guys like that, there's him, and then there's also Peter Volwater, the Dutch sailor, who took his life a couple of years ago. And I'm sure they're not the only 2, but the 2 I know of. There's like I said, the Robbies, the Anders, the Bjorns, they're obviously the names that everyone can relate to, but there's a lot of names in the sport. Torkel Christensen, Danish sailor.
Yeah.
Yep.
Gentle Giants. Karen Yagi. Yeah, I've had something to do with most of those guys over my career in the windsurfing industry, and there's not very many that I wouldn't stop and have a drink with.
Yeah, which is such a cool thing to be able to say, because I feel like windsurfing does produce that type of character. Like there's not many, it's like you say, there's not many that I wouldn't want to have a drink with, you know.
Yeah.
It's especially from my racing days. Like I'm not to say the wave sailors I wouldn't want to drink with, but I don't know what it is racing wise. There's always this different vibe. Like wave sailing always feels very
well, you know what it is. One's subjective and one isn't. And the one that's subjective, they're all easygoing. I think on the when they're out of the water.
Yeah. No, but it's interesting you say that, and it's true. And that is the difference. The subjective and it's results based. With racing, there's no arguing. You come in, you either won or you didn't. It's like boxing. If you punch someone in the face and they go down, you've got to get up and shake the hand and say, look, it's obvious you beat me. I can't do anything. With racing, it's the same. With wave sailing, you come in, a couple of your mates go, oh, you got it. The other guys go, oh, maybe. And then some judge decides, and you're left a little bit like you can, if you're not the right personality, you can feel like everyone's against you sometimes. And, oh, it's not fair. And Whereas racing, it isn't like that. And maybe that is the difference.
Yeah,
that's interesting, actually.
But you know, I can tell you, I've been on the beach, wherever it is in the world, and I've seen those guys come off the water and shake each other's hands. Like, you know, Bjorn gave Anders a good race, and other guys would then come in and shake each other's hands and say, well done. You know, very, very rarely there'd be a protest. You know, there was always, not always, but occasionally there would be problems where the guys would have a protest and go,
yeah,
you know, you sailed into me. It was your fault that I didn't win. But that wasn't common. It was more common that the guys would shake hands at the end of the race.
I would say that's my experience of racing as well. You know, obviously there's the odd scuffles and there's the odd rivalries that are bigger than others, but on a whole, it's quite you know, like you say, off the water is totally different to on the water. It's kind of, you leave all your battles on the water within reason.
The other thing I find interesting with windsurfers as well is the how many of them either stick at it, or they sort of like it's like once you're a windsurfer, whatever you do in life, it's kind of like you've branded yourself windsurfing. It's kind of becomes a part of you or something. Yeah. It's weird. It's because I've met a few people. I've got this YouTube channel, and one guy's Rich Myers. I did a video, and well, he doesn't windsurf anymore, although he was actually talking about getting an LT. So hopefully he's doing that. But he went into surfing. But he, he had this big, career in windsurfing. Then it all just kind of abruptly stopped because life took him another direction. But I go over to his house to make a video of him, and he's got this room. It's like a memorabilia room, and you open up it's like his chests, and they're just full of windsurf memorabilia and photos and magazines. A bit like you when I said, "Oh, Willie, have you got any photos?" And all of a sudden you're showing me, magazines and things. It's kind of like, I think it certainly it does something to you, windsurfing. And even if you stop at some point, I think you have fond memories. I mean, even these guys, I'm impressed with guys like Dunkerbeck and Nash. The two legends of the sport, and they're still hard at it. Dunkerbeck, I don't know, Dunkerbeck is just full on windsurfing all the time, and Robbie Nash
windsurfing. I'm not sure Bjorn is doing as much windsurfing as he used to. I get the impression, he's got young kids now, and they're starting to get involved, like Liam, and then there's Daniel as well.
Yeah.
So he's got kids that are starting to show an interest, and so he's supporting his kids.
Mm-hmm.
That's what when I say full on, I'm including that. Just still very involved. Now he's supporting his kid, and they've got the Dunkerbeck Windsurf Center. I mean, he could have just gone, all right, I'm done, and moved on and gone into a completely different field. But he's still very involved. It's very interesting. And Robbie Nash, I've noticed there's a few videos of him, keeper these days, whereas So he's obviously almost going. He still loves it. It's just interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, hard to get that sensation with other things.
Foiling.
Oh, foiling.
We've got to talk about it. It seems to be we always talk about it. What's your take on foiling, Willie?
I think that's the elephant in the room, isn't it?
I think it is for some people, for sure. Like I mean, it definitely gets a mixture of opinions, and they're usually quite polarized, and they're usually quite different. What's your take?
Look at it.
Because in yachting as well. I mean, you come from a yachting background. I mean, that's obviously creeping in there as well. Well, not creeping in. It's
there.
It's there.
It's it seems very clinical in terms of the few guys that I do see out. Let's say with a windsurfing sail on a foil, they get powered up very quickly, and I think it has its place. I'm just not sure about as for windsurfing and foiling, everyone seems to be going at the same speed. Whenever I see it, and they do have races, right? They do have slalom and racing with foils. I don't know. It seems like cheating. It's almost like we say one thing in cycling. We say eating is cheating, and I think foiling is cheating when you're when you're trying to windsurf, because it's not the real. It's not what windsurfing was ever designed to be.
Yeah, is it like I say? It's interesting. I've definitely seen difference of opinions on it, and I get what you're saying.
I think if you do it regularly and it's your thing, well then that's your thing. But it's still not hardcore windsurfing, is it?
Well, I would agree. For me, it feels like a different sport, and that's not a negative. It's just a classification. It is different for me. It is different, which again is not a bad thing. And it also, I think I think we've done this subject to death, but I think it just depends on where you are, who you're around, what conditions,
and the conditions you live in.
Yeah,
I mean, I get the impression that they power up very quickly and they go fast in straight lines, which is great for, let's say, going for a coastal run down the coast or something like that, or but it's not the same as doing it with a normal fin.
Yeah. I mean, they're definitely they're just different.
They have their place.
Yeah, they're just different. That's for sure. Because with a foil, you can point all different directions, and you get out quicker. I think it's great for racing, but I think we shouldn't kill the fin just yet. Let's face it. We shouldn't fill the board in the water just yet. I think there's.
I see Kai Lenny doing big things with the fin in some big waves, and he's obviously experimenting still. Trying to loop the board or do things with the board in the waves, but it doesn't seem as maneuverable for him. He's got it's pretty much a straight line machine.
Yeah.
In a way, the foil is a bit like the e-bike of the bike world, isn't it? It's a bit easier and it's whatever, but it doesn't mean that people are going to stop buying the non-e-bikes. It's and like today I went for a windsurf. I got off the water and I'm not doing any other exercise at the moment except for windsurfing, and you get a great workout from it as well. I actually, is a big part of the reason why I windsurf is just for physical activity.
Main activity.
What's that?
I'm just saying, your LT, are you going to be able to sail from the house? You probably are, aren't you?
Yeah. I'm walking distance from the water, so I could just carry it or wheel it down or whatever I need to do. I need to get one first, but I will. I'll get one.
And I think that'll be the problem. That'll be the problem for a lot of people, is the difference between being able to just walk across the road or something, or walk to the yacht club, as opposed to sitting in the car and driving it somewhere. That's.
Yeah, but that's Ben and I were just touching on that when you weren't here a few minutes ago. That's where you utilise the sailing clubs, because in Perth, when I went to visit the Netherlands Sailing Club, they have like 50 stored in the shed, and people can just come down and join and probably get one, or at least store one or use one. So I think that the key there is going to utilize sailing clubs for that. Yeah, I think it's the infrastructure's there and it's nice. They're usually pretty nice places, sailing clubs. They've got a nice lawn you can rig on and all that sort of stuff. So it's I reckon, Benny, have you got any more questions for Willie? I'm getting a bit I'm struggling to. The problem when you get a guy like Willie is he's been around for 30 plus years, 40 years and whatever in windsurfing, and sometimes I know that it's hard to do it justice. You go, where do you start? Or something.
But it's always difficult, but I think I've got quite a lot of good answers to what I wanted to do. So I'm happy. It's good. I would like to see you go back windsurfing. When was the last time you actually was on a board?
God, too long ago.
So that's what I mean. It'd be really interesting to put you back on a good day and just then record the reaction. Be interesting.
Yeah.
That'd be quite interesting.
I'm close to getting involved with the Windsurfer LT, and it's where I started, so it's definitely where I will go. Cool. But I was looking at Facebook and I see Scotty O'Connor. We're probably in the same age bracket, and I see his fingers are all chopped up from hanging onto that boom because I don't know if you have a close look at some of Scotty O'Connor's pictures and. He's got blood. He's got
He's been training by the sound of it. That's what that comes
He's
from.
in Perth at the moment, training for I think they've got an event on like a Perth or an Open Championship this weekend in Perth, and then in 2 weeks' time they got the World Championship. So he's getting ready.
I can give you a tip with the hand thing, and I learned from a fisherman that goes out to sea for multiple days and pulling on ropes and getting a lot of problems with hands. What's that? Go to the chemist. You can buy this tube of hand cream. It's called Tough Hands, Willie. Just go into Chemist Warehouse and you put it on. It creates like a bit of a barrier on your hands. Plus, it softens up your skin. It's like an industrial moisturizer sort of thing.
So is that for before sailing or after sailing?
Before. You put it before and then put it up. Like if you know you're going to sail multiple days, put it before and put it after. And I've gone on windsurf trips where I haven't sailed for months. My hands have softened up and I've taken with me, do it 2 times, sailed for 7-10 days straight. I know it's a bit weird. Like guys don't talk about hand stuff, but I've taken it. My hands have not got... I'm just saying, because it's like if you start getting open up wounds in your hand, it's annoying.
Yeah. No, I'm just looking at the old calluses. I think we finally got rid of the calluses. That's the thing I'm sort of worried about.
You build them up.
Back. They're good for mountain biking.
Yeah, that's right.
But with this stuff, they do come back, but it just gives you, rather than just having these like open sore wounds and you can't even sail, it's kind of like it just helps that process without opening everything up. Anyway, something to think about if you get back into it.
Boys.
I think now's the time to do it.
Good on you, Willie.
Willie's going to enter the Worlds next time we speak to him.
No, he's not going to enter the Worlds. But what I am going to do is I'm going to go catch up with everyone that's in town.
Yeah.
And catch up with a lot of old friends. I mean, there's still the people who there are a lot of people I haven't seen. So
super cool, man.
Cool. And if you guys want to do this again, if you feel like you've got some questions at any point, feel free to set it up. I'm this sort of time of day suits me fine.
No problem. Sounds good.
And Rick Murray, I thought you were supposed to
piss.
I know Rick. And Rick, I think Rick's taking the piss. I know Rick very well. Yeah, he's having a laugh.
Rick's been around a long time as well.
He sure has.
He's a legend.
Yeah.
Awesome, Willie. Thank you so much for finally getting on the podcast.
For many, many years, old Rick.
Yeah.
Out of interest, who do you want to see on the podcast? Who would you like to see a podcast about? Anyone? Who would have some? Would be an interesting.
Good
You
question.
know, the one person I've lost contact with is Barry Spanier. I doubt you'll get a hold of him because he's probably on a boat somewhere having a good time. Let me think about it. I'll message you, Paul. Yeah, I can't think of someone, but yeah, if you guys have questions or anything you want me to expand on in the future, I'm always available. I still have a passion for the sport.
What do you actually? I got a question for you, Willie. What do you think of simmer sails?
I don't have an opinion. No comment.
I'm only joking.
I haven't actually. I mean, you know, Klaus and Malta. I sort of think back to the days of when Malta, Simmer, and Klaus were actively involved in it. I know Thomas is doing the design work, and I know that Niels Rosenblad did the design work at one stage. I haven't seen. I haven't seen too many of those sails. It's hard, you know. I live in a place where Ben Severn lives about a couple hundred meters from where I am, and he works about the same distance from where I work. So I see Ben a lot, and I see a lot of his product on the water as well. I don't see a lot of simmer sails on the water, so it's really hard to comment.
Western Australia is pretty much Severn territory everywhere. I mean,
occasionally you'll see other stuff around, but you know, I was down at North Beach on Monday when it was blowing, and there was probably, you know, there's only half a dozen guys out in the water, and all of them were on Severn sails.
Yeah, a lot of them are mates.
Boring. They don't support the channel.
Well, the reason I asked about Simmer, I don't know if you know, but Ben's sponsored by them, so just a bit of cheeky banter.
But
I picked that up. I did pick that up.
Okay. Oh, you picked it up. Okay.
So I am aware of that.
Yeah, we should maybe get Thomas Pearson on. Maybe get him on with Tim, because those are good friends.
Tim who?
Tim, my memory's not so good. World champ around the same time as Thomas. Tim and Tom. Tim Igerson. I think so. Tim and Tom. They came to Ireland when I was living there back in the mid '80s. I heard those two used to go together. They sure did, and they used to drink a lot of alcohol. Exactly. I'm sure they got some good stories. Oh yeah, we all have some good stories. Probably less for public consumption. Yeah.
Have you had Nick Baker on the podcast, Ben?
Yeah.
Oh, I've had him. Okay, I must have missed that one.
Well, Matchek had him.
Yeah, Matchek. Yeah, no, that's cool.
That was good. It's a good podcast. I mean, it's really interesting. Like listening to Nick's podcast, I just remember listening to it and thinking it really felt like he had a lot. Like he wanted to tell the stories because you could feel like that's the thing when you've been involved with that for so long, and that maybe the internet wasn't around. You know, it sounds really stupid, but it wasn't.
We didn't even have iPhones to take photographs of it.
Yeah, so there's a lot of missing stuff.
Yeah.
There's a lot of missing stuff, which is why when Matchek, you know, when we started up the podcast, you could feel it was really interesting because it was like the missing pieces. So it was like putting history on the internet, you know, from these guys, which I think is really quite important. It's quite important. I think it's really interesting because some of it will get lost. I keep saying to Finian Maynard, we need to get you on the podcast because he has got like a long history of stuff.
Yeah.
And some real
it would be actually kind of cool to do it with someone like Finian or any of those guys that I've worked with, you know, instead of just doing one-on-one with you guys, to actually do it with four people and do it with you know, for me to do it with Finian. I haven't spoken to him that long, but
it's true.
That'd be cool.
It would be fun to do it with some of, you know, with maybe not necessarily me and someone, but you know, I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, but I know what you mean. The concept is actually good because that's what I was saying before. You need those memories to be sparking off other memories, and if you've got someone who has been around in the same time and doing similar things, you know, the stories always cross over, and I think Makes sense.
I mean, Finian's history doesn't go back as far back as someone like Robbie or Bjorn, but you know, any one of those guys, even Nick Baker, you know, they're all. It would be a hoot to do it with some of those guys.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have to pencil that in for the future, Willie. We'll get one of these guys and get you back.
Yeah, happy to do it anytime.
Super cool.
All right, man. I've got to go look after the baby because she's ill.
To go.
We're gonna wrap it up. Yeah, I've got a sick baby at the moment. She's been ill for a week. So
good luck, guys. Have a great evening. Cheers.
Thanks a lot for doing it, Willie. And until the next time.
Yep, no worries. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks, Willie. Take care, mate.
It's that time of the week again. Sit back, relax, we got the brain of band. No need to stress in the house, it's Van Bellen. The game is windsurfing, you can't yell them or tell them. We get the news, the views, the win biz. The brand's gear tips plus the world's best quiz. Cogs, PWA. We're professionals without the pay. There's nothing in pole dancing that we won't chat. From tandem boards to a windsurfing cat. It's your one-stop shop for a laugh and listen. Tune in each week or you'll be doing the missing.